She didn't scream. She didn't cry. When the auctioneer's hammer fell and the crowd laughed at the number $40, Clara Dawson simply looked at her father's face. He was smiling. That was the moment something inside her stopped breaking and started building. Before this story goes any further, if you've ever been told you weren't worth much, subscribe to this channel. Stay until the very end and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Clara's story travels. The summer of 1883 came to Redstone Gulch the way it always did, hard, dry, and without apology. The sun pressed down on the main street like a flat iron on old cotton, bleaching the wooden storefronts white and cracking the earth between the wagon ruts into long, ugly lines. Dust hung in the air without moving. Flies circled the water trough near the livery stable. And every person in town who had nothing better to do, which was most of them, had gathered in front of the auction platform outside Hargrove's General Store, fanning themselves with their hats and waiting for the spectacle to begin. Clara Dawson stood at the edge of the platform steps. She was 24 years old. She wore a gray dress that had been washed so many times the fabric had lost its original color, the hem mended in 3 places with thread that didn't quite match. Her dark brown hair was pinned back in the way her mother used to pin it, though her mother had been dead 6 years, and Clara had been doing it herself ever since learning the shape of it by memory and by feel. She was a large woman, broad-shouldered, full-figured, the kind of woman that men in Redstone Gulch felt entitled to remark upon openly, as though her body were public property subject to community comment. She had heard every variation of every remark since she was 12 years old. She had stopped flinching at them years ago, but she had never stopped hearing them. She was not looking at the crowd. She was looking at her father. Harlan Dawson stood just to the left of the auctioneer wearing his best vest. The brown one he only brought out for occasions. He considered important. He had his thumbs hooked in his pockets, and he was talking to the auctioneer in a low voice, nodding occasionally, and there was something in his posture that Clara recognized. It was the posture of a man who had already made a deal. The posture of a man concluding business. She had seen it before. The morning he sold the north pasture. The afternoon he sold her mother's sewing machine 3 weeks after the funeral. The evening he sold the last of the livestock and came home smelling like whiskey, and told Clara that everything was going to be fine, now just fine. They just needed to get through the rough patch. She had believed him then. She was not going to make that mistake again. "Harlan," she said quietly from the bottom of the steps. "What is this?" He looked over at her, and there was something in his eyes, not guilt, because Harlan Dawson had never been particularly burdened by guilt, but something adjacent to discomfort, something that recognized her gaze and didn't enjoy it. "Clara," he said with the particular tone of a man preparing to explain a thing he knew could not be adequately explained. "Now this is a practical matter. You know how things have been. You know the debt I'm carrying." "I know the debt," she said. "I also know what an auction platform looks like." "It's not—" He stopped, started again. "There's a system. Been done before. A man takes on a woman, provides for her, gives her room and board, and a reasonable arrangement, and in exchange for what, Pa?" Her voice was very flat, very quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peace. It's the quiet before a structure fails. He straightened his vest. "In exchange for her labor, her domestic contribution. It's a legal arrangement, respectable." "You're selling me?" Clara said. "I'm arranging a placement." "You're selling me," she said again, not louder, just clearer. Harlan Dawson looked away, and that was the answer she needed. The auctioneer, a red-faced man named Gus Pell, who smelled of bay rum and bad judgment, climbed up onto the platform and clapped his hands together like a man calling children to dinner. "All right, folks, we got a fine offering here today for any man in need of a good domestic arrangement. Good strong woman knows her way around a kitchen good with figures, I'm told. Father vouches for her character, vouches for her work ethic." There was a murmur through the crowd, not the murmur of disapproval, the murmur of people settling in to be entertained. Clara climbed the 3 steps onto the platform. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked at the far end of the street where the road bent around the livery stable and disappeared toward the open country. She focused on that bend in the road. She fixed her eyes on it like it was a fixed star, and she was navigating by it. "Now who wants to start the bidding?" Gus Pell called out. "Come on, don't be shy. Strong woman, healthy good worker." Someone in the crowd called out, "How much does she weigh?" Laughter. Loud, easy laughter, the kind that comes to people naturally when someone else is the subject of the joke. Clara did not move. "I'll offer $15, said a voice she recognized Ed Greer from the feed store, who had a wife already and was apparently interested in arrangements beyond that. 15. Do I hear 20? 15 seems generous, said another voice, and more laughter. Clara's jaw tightened, her hands folded in front of her pressed together until the knuckles were white, but her face was completely still. "Come on now, $20. Good worker, I tell you. 20? 20, said another voice, a farmer she didn't recognize, an older man with a sun-ruined face who looked her up and down with the assessment of a man pricing grain. $20. Now 30. 25, said Ed Greer. 25. Now 30. 25 and a bushel of corn, said the farmer, and the crowd laughed again. Clara stared at the bend in the road. She was thinking about numbers. She always thought about numbers when she needed to go somewhere safe inside herself. Her mind had always worked that way, orderly mathematical finding pattern in chaos. She could hold a column of figures in her head and work through it while the rest of her stayed perfectly still, like a woman doing arithmetic in the middle of a flood. Her mother had said it was a gift. The town had mostly decided it was peculiar. Her father had never noticed it at all. She was calculating now the total of her father's debts as she knew them. The loan from the Redstone Gulch savings and loan the overdue account at Hargrove's, the back taxes on the property that she had overheard discussed in the kitchen 2 weeks ago when Harlan thought she was asleep. She was adding these numbers together, and she was thinking about what they meant, and she was thinking about what she would need and where she would need to go and how. $30, said a new voice, quieter than the others. She didn't look to see who it was. $30 now we're moving 40? 35, said the farmer. 35, $40. A pause. $40, said her father. Clara looked at him. He was not meeting her eyes. He was looking at Gus Pell with the expression of a man completing a transaction, not the expression of a man selling his child. He had raised the bid on himself, she realized. He had bid on her. Not to save her because it would push the price up, because it would drive someone else to go higher, because $40 was the minimum he needed, and he was making sure he got it. The crowd was delighted. This was the best auction Redstone Gulch had seen in years. $40. Do I hear 45? Silence. 45. Come on now, strong woman, good worker. More silence. Going once at $40. Don't, said a voice. It came from the back of the crowd. Male voice. Low, not loud. Not commanding, just certain the way a man is certain when he's already made up his mind and he's not particularly interested in arguing about it. The crowd shifted. People turned. Clara turned. The man standing at the back was tall, and he had the kind of build that comes from years of actual physical labor rather than the decorative muscle of men who want to look strong. He wore a dark hat pulled low, a worn canvas duster despite the summer heat, and he was watching the platform with an expression that was very difficult to read. Not anger, not exactly. Something more controlled than anger. Something colder and more purposeful. She had seen him before. Once in the mercantile buying rope and nails. Once passing through on horseback with 3 other men she didn't know. His name was Ethan Ward. He owned a ranch about 6 miles out on the east side of Redstone Creek. She knew this the way she knew most things about people in Redstone Gulch, by listening and by paying attention to things other people thought weren't worth paying attention to. "Mr. Ward," Gus Pell said, with the slightly nervous tone of a man who had just realized this entertainment might complicate itself. "You putting in a bid?" "No," Ethan Ward said. "Then I'd ask you to let the—" "I said don't," he said again, still quiet. still certain. End it. Harlan Dawson stepped forward. Now see here, Ward. This is illegal. Nothing about this is legal. Ethan Ward walked through the crowd and people moved aside for him, not because he was pushing, he wasn't, but because there was something in the way he moved that made a person feel that not moving would be a significant error in judgment. He stopped at the bottom of the platform steps and looked up at Clara, not at her body, at her face, at her eyes, specifically the way a person looks at another person. Miss. She looked back at him. Sir, you have somewhere to go. She considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. No. He nodded once as though she had confirmed something he'd already suspected. Then he looked at Harlan. You got a debt, he said. How much? Harlan blinked. I beg your pardon? Your debt. The number you need. What is it? Harlan's eyes shifted. That's a private. It ain't private when you're putting your daughter on a platform to cover it. What's the number? A long pause. The crowd was absolutely silent now, which was the most extraordinary thing that had happened in Redstone Gulch in some time. $63, Harlan said finally in a voice that had lost all its earlier confidence. Plus the back taxes. Ethan Ward reached into his coat, produced a folded envelope, and held it out to Harlan without stepping any closer so that Harlan had to come to him. That covers it. Harlan took the envelope. He opened it. He looked at the contents. Something moved across his face. Clara watched it move and tried to identify it. Not quite relief. Not quite shame. Something between them. Something that hadn't quite decided what it was yet. What is this for? Harlan asked. For nothing, Ethan Ward said. There's no arrangement, no placement, no transaction of any kind. That's a gift, and you can do what you like with it, and it comes with exactly one condition, which is, you leave your daughter alone from this day forward. The crowd had gone so quiet, Clara could hear the flies around the water trough. Now wait just a moment, Harlan said, his voice climbing back toward its usual register of injured authority. You can't come in here and— I already did, Ethan Ward said. Miss Dawson. He turned back to Clara. You're welcome to stay in town. You're welcome to go anywhere you choose. I have a bunkhouse at my ranch with a room that's empty. You can use it if you need a place for as long as you need it, and there's no condition attached to that offer either. Your choice entirely. Clara looked at him for a long moment. She was good at reading people better than most people knew, because most people didn't think she was watching. She read him now. She looked for what people usually wanted when they made offers. The calculation behind the generosity. The claim being staked under the appearance of kindness. She didn't find it. That frightened her almost as much as the auction had. Why? She said. He looked at her steadily. Because it's right. That's not a full answer. A pause. Something that might very distantly have been a half smile moved at the corner of his mouth, and then was gone. No, it ain't, he said. But it's the honest one. She stood on the platform for another moment, looking at him, looking at the crowd, looking at her father, who was still holding the envelope, and would not meet her eyes. She stepped down off the platform. She walked past her father without saying anything. Past Gus Pell, past Ed Greer and the sun-ruined farmer and every person in Redstone Gulch who had stood in the summer heat and watched her be priced and laughed at the number. She stopped beside Ethan Ward. I'll need to collect my things from the house, she said. I'll wait, he said. She walked up the main street of Redstone Gulch for what she was fairly certain would be the last time she walked it as Harlan Dawson's daughter. The sun was brutal. The dust was thick. Behind her she could hear the crowd beginning to talk again, the way crowds do when the entertainment is over, and they're putting it into the shape of a story they can tell later. She didn't listen. She was already thinking about numbers. About $63 in back taxes. About a man who had handed over that sum and asked for nothing. About what nothing usually costs in her experience, and what it cost this time, and whether there was a difference. She wasn't sure yet. But she was going to find out. The house she had grown up in was small and tired-looking. The way houses get when the people inside them stop caring for the same things at the same time. Clara moved through it quickly, efficiently, the way she did most things. She took her mother's Bible. She took the small tin box where she kept the ledger pages she'd been copying out for years. Figures, records, survey notes she'd found in her father's papers and transcribed because something in them had never added up right, and she had wanted to understand why. She took a change of clothes and her mother's good shawl, and she tied these things into a bundle and was done in 11 minutes. She stood in the doorway and looked at the kitchen one last time. The cast iron pan on the stove. The cracked cup on the shelf that had been her mother's favorite. The table where she had eaten 10,000 meals and listened to her father explain why things were fine, always fine, just needed to get through the rough patch. She closed the door. She did not look back at it. Ethan Ward was where he said he'd be, at the end of the street, holding the reins of a gray horse, and a second horse, a brown one, patiently, the way a man waits when he means what he said about waiting. She looked at the second horse. "You planned for this." "Hoped," he said. "There's a difference." "Yes, ma'am." She mounted the brown horse without assistance, which she had been doing since she was 8 years old, and he said nothing about it one way or the other, which she noted. They rode out of Redstone Gulch in the direction of Redstone Creek, and the town shrank behind them, and the summer heat pressed down on everything equally, and neither of them spoke for a long time. When she did speak, she said, "I want to be clear about something." "All right," he said. "I am grateful for what you did. I want you to know I understand what it cost, and I don't take it lightly. You don't owe me anything for it." "I know I don't," she said. "That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm aware of what it is. The debt is mine to carry internally, and I carry it honestly. But I want to be clear that I am not arriving at your ranch in a condition of obligation. I am arriving in a condition of—" She paused, finding the right word. "Temporary reliance, which I intend to move out of as quickly as possible." He was quiet for a moment. "That's a fair way to put it. I can work," she said. "I can cook, and I can keep accounts, and I can do arithmetic that your ranch hand would need paper for. I am not asking for charity." "I'm not offering it," he said. "I have books that haven't been properly kept in 2 years. I have contracts I don't trust and figures that don't resolve. If you can do what you say you can do, there's work." She looked at him from the side. "What happened to the person who was keeping your books?" A pause, longer than the previous ones. "Left," he said. She noted the pause. She noted the quality of it, not evasive exactly, more like a man stepping carefully around something that was still on the ground. "All right," she said. She would come back to that. "And what are you expecting in return for the room?" "The work," he said. "That's all. And if I find the work doesn't take me as long as the room is worth, then we renegotiate," he said. And there was something in his voice that was almost dry, almost like a man who found this particular line of conversation unexpectedly worth having. "I reckon we can figure it out." Clara faced forward again. The road ahead curved around a stand of cottonwoods, white and silver green in the heat, the leaves moving even when there was no wind she could feel. Beyond them, somewhere, was Redstone Creek and the Ward Ranch and a bunkhouse room with no conditions attached. She was not naive enough to believe that no conditions existed. Nothing in her 24 years had suggested that the world operated that way. But she was observant enough to recognize when a man was keeping his word in the ways that could be observed, and sharp enough to be watching for the ways that couldn't be. She was watching. "The name they called me," she said after another silence. "In town." "I heard it," he said. "I'd prefer you didn't use it." "I won't," he said. Simply. No particular emphasis, no reassurance layered on top of it. Just "I won't." She nodded. The cottonwoods closed around them, and the sound of Redstone Gulch faded entirely, replaced by the dry song of insects and the movement of horses through summer grass, and the particular quality of silence that exists only in wide-open country when two people who don't know each other yet have run out of the things they're willing to say, Clara Dawson rode into that silence with her bundle on her back and her mother's Bible under her arm, and $63 worth of someone else's judgment hanging over her head like weather she hadn't figured out yet. She was good with numbers. She would figure it out. Old Sam Briggs was sitting on the fence rail outside the main barn when they rode in, whittling something out of a piece of cedar with the focused patience of a man who had nowhere else to be and didn't mind it. He was 60 if he was a day brown and weathered, with the kind of face that looked like country, not beautiful, just permanent, like it had been there a long time and intended to stay. He looked up when they came into the yard. He looked at Ethan. He looked at Clara. He looked at the bundle she was carrying. He looked back at Ethan again, with an expression that communicated a significant amount without committing to any of it. "Sam," Ethan said, dismounting. "This is Miss Clara Dawson. She'll be staying in the east bunkhouse room. She's going to be working the books." Sam Briggs looked at Clara for a long moment with the searching, unhurried attention of a man who had been reading people for 60 years and trusted the skill. Then he touched the brim of his hat. "Miss Dawson." "Mr. Briggs," she said. "Sam'll do," he said. "Then Clara'll do," she said. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. More like a small internal adjustment, the kind a person makes when something confirms a thing they were already thinking. "Room's clean?" he said to Ethan. "I aired it this morning." Ethan looked at him. "How'd you know?" "I didn't," Sam said, and went back to his whittling. Clara dismounted and followed Ethan across the yard toward the bunkhouse. She was cataloging everything: the state of the fencing, the equipment visible near the barn, the condition of the outbuildings. Her mind was working the way it always worked, taking inventory, looking for what was there and what wasn't, what the numbers would look like when she got a proper look at them. She already suspected they were going to be bad. She already suspected that $63 was not the most interesting problem in Redstone Gulch this summer. She was right. She just didn't know yet how right she was. The east bunkhouse room was small and smelled like cedar and old wool, and it had one window that looked out toward the creek. Clara set her bundle on the narrow bed and stood in the center of the room for exactly 1 minute, which was how long she allowed herself. 1 minute to feel the weight of the day. 1 minute to acknowledge what had happened on that platform in front of every person in Redstone Gulch. 1 minute to be the woman who had been sold for $40 and had not cried about it. Then she unpacked her things, made a mental note of what the room contained and what it lacked, and went to find the books. Ethan Ward's office was in the main house off the front hallway, a room that was clearly used for working rather than for appearances. There was a desk that had seen significant use, a chair behind it, 2 chairs in front of it, and shelves along one wall that held a collection of ledgers, contracts, and loose papers in a state of organization that told Clara everything she needed to know about the past 2 years of the ranch's financial management. Which was to say, there had not been any. She stood in the doorway and looked at it. "It's worse than it looks," Ethan said from somewhere behind her. "I don't think it is," she said. She heard him pause. "How can you tell from the doorway? The ledgers for 21 and 82 are on different shelves with no logical system between them. The contracts are filed by date, received not by party, which means when you need to find something by name, you have to go through everything. The loose papers in the right stack have water damage on the bottom third, which means they've been on the floor at some point, and whoever picked them up didn't sort them before restacking. And that green ledger on the second shelf has been opened so many times the spine is broken, which means someone was going back to it repeatedly, probably trying to reconcile something that wasn't reconciling." She turned around and looked at him. Who was the someone? He looked at her with an expression she was beginning to recognize as his default, careful, assessing, not unfriendly, but unwilling to offer anything before he decided it was worth offering. "Man named Holt," he said. "Kept the books for 3 years, left 8 months ago." Left or was let go? Another one of those pauses. "Quit. Said he had a better offer in Cheyenne." "Did he?" "Don't know," Ethan said. "Didn't check." Clara looked back at the shelves. "I'm going to need a week," she said. "Possibly 2. And I'm going to need you to answer my questions honestly when I ask them, even if the answers are uncomfortable. I can do that. I'm also going to need access to anything Holt left behind. Any papers he was working with. Anything he took with him, I'd want to know what it was. The pause this time was different. Longer. Heavier in a way she noticed, but couldn't yet name. There wasn't much, he said. He left clean. Men who leave clean, Clara said carefully, are usually either very honest or very careful. In my experience, the two are not always the same thing. Ethan Ward looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "You want coffee while you work?" "Yes," she said. "Thank you." She went to the desk and sat down and opened the green ledger, and the numbers inside it began to tell her a story. She didn't like the story. She didn't say so yet. The first week at the Ward Ranch passed in a rhythm Clara had not expected: work and quiet, and the slow discovery that both could exist in the same place without one destroying the other. She was up before sunrise every morning, which was a habit from the Dawson house, where you got to the kitchen first, or you got to it cold. She lit the stove and made coffee, and sat with the ledgers at the kitchen table, while the sky outside went from black to gray to the particular pale gold of early summer morning. And she worked through the numbers with the focused attention of a woman who had been waiting her whole life to be given a problem worth solving. And it was a problem worth solving. The Ranch Ward's Crossing. It was called for the Creek Ford on the east boundary, was a working cattle operation about 420 acres when fully accounted for. Should have been profitable. The land was good, the water supply reliable, the herd numbers reasonable for the acreage. On paper, the operation made sense. But the books told a different story. Over the past 2 years, there had been a series of payments going out to an entity identified in the ledger only as RC Land and Title, regular quarterly, in amounts that escalated each time. The first payment 18 months ago was $40. The most recent 3 months ago was $210. Clara added them up twice to make sure she had it right. Then she sat very still for a moment and looked at the sum. $870. Paid to an entity she had never heard of for a purpose the ledger described only as boundary assessment fees. She had never heard of a boundary assessment fee. She was fairly certain boundary assessment fees were not a real thing. She went to the shelf and pulled the contract files. She worked through them alphabetically, then chronologically, and found nothing under RC Land and Title. No contract, no agreement, no correspondence. Nothing that explained $870 going out the door in 18 months. She sat back in the chair. She thought about Holt, who had left clean. She thought about the green ledger with the broken spine opened so many times someone had worn the binding out. She thought about the way Ethan Ward paused before answering certain questions. The particular weight of those pauses, like a man stepping carefully around something on the ground. She picked up her pen and made a note in the margin of her working paper, in her own small, precise handwriting. RC, Land and Title, no contract on file. Origin unknown, escalating. Who authorized? Then she closed the ledger and went to make breakfast. Because Sam Briggs had told her that the ranch hands came in at 6:30 and Ethan Ward ate with them, and she had already decided that the best way to learn everything she needed to learn was to be present at as many meals as possible and to listen more than she spoke. She was very good at listening. Sam Briggs found her in the yard that afternoon, hanging the dish towels on the line. Not because she'd been asked to, but because they needed it and she was passing by, and she was not a woman who passed by things that needed doing. "You found something," he said. She looked at him. He was sitting on the fence rail again, same posture as yesterday, same cedar stick, different shape emerging from it. "What makes you say that?" "You were quiet at breakfast," he said. "Not shy quiet, thinking quiet, different." She considered whether to answer. Then she said, "Do you know anything about RC Land and Title?" Something moved across his face. It was quick, and he controlled it fast, but she caught it a tightening around the eyes, a fractional change in the set of his jaw. "Where'd you see that name?" "The ledger." He said. "That's not an answer, Sam." "No, it ain't," he said. It's a sound a man makes when he's thinking about how much to say. Then I'll help you decide, Clara said. Ethan Ward paid $870 to an entity that has no contract on file, no correspondence on file, and no explanation in the books beyond the words boundary assessment fees, which I don't believe are a real category of expense. Whatever that money went to, it wasn't legitimate. And I'd like to know who's receiving it and why, because if this ranch is being drained deliberately, the person doing it is going to keep doing it until there's nothing left to drain. Sam Briggs was quiet for a long time. He turned the cedar stick in his hands. He looked at it, not at her. Victor Cain, he said finally. You know that name? She did. Everyone in the county knew Victor Cain, at least by reputation. He was based in Cheyenne, but his interests, land finance property, reached into every corner of the territory, like roots looking for water. He was not the kind of man who appeared in ledgers with his own name attached. He worked through entities, through proxies, through paperwork, layered on paperwork, until the original source was 3 steps removed from anything that could be proved. RC Land and Title, she said. That's his. Best anyone can tell, Sam said. Can't prove it. Never been able to prove it. That's the thing about Cain. He don't do anything you can touch. Everything's legal. Everything's got papers. But the papers don't always match up to what actually happened, and by the time you notice the money's already gone. What does he want with this ranch? Clara asked. Water rights, Sam said simply. Ward's Crossing Ford controls access to 30 miles of creek. Anyone who owns this land controls water for 6 other operations downstream. Cain's been buying up those downstream operations for 2 years. Once he's got them all he needs, the Ford to make it worth anything. Without Ward's Crossing, his whole scheme don't hold water. He paused. No pun intended. Clara looked at the dish towels on the line moving slightly in the afternoon air. Her mind was working fast, filing things, connecting things, drawing lines between the numbers in the ledger and what Sam had just told her. Does Ethan know this? Ethan knows something's wrong, Sam said. Don't know if he knows what or how deep it goes. He's not a man who looks at papers. He looks at land, at cattle, at weather, at the things he can see. Papers, he trusts people to handle papers. He trusted Holt to handle papers, Clara said. Sam's expression shifted. Holt left clean, he said. I know, Clara said. That's what worries me. She didn't tell Ethan that night. She needed more information first. She needed to understand the full shape of it before she showed it to him, because she had learned in the Dawson kitchen, in 24 years of watching a man make bad decisions, based on incomplete information and pride, that showing a man half a problem often made things worse than showing him none of it. She sat with the ledgers until midnight by lamplight, and she built a timeline. Every payment to RC Land and Title cross-referenced with the dates of contracts, signed deliveries received, and a collection of loose surveys and boundary documents she found in the bottom drawer of the desk that someone Holt she assumed had never filed properly. The surveys were the interesting part. There were 2 sets of them. The original survey dated 1871, which established the eastern boundary of Ward's Crossing at Redstone Creek, and a second set of documents dated 1880, which described a boundary correction that moved that eastern line approximately 40 yards west, which, if accepted as the legal boundary, would place the fort itself outside the ranch's property. She sat with these 2 documents for a long time. The 1880 documents had been filed with the county recorder's office. She could see the recording stamp on the corner. They had been accepted as official. They were in the file. And if they were legitimate, Ethan Ward did not own the Ford. But the 1871 survey was signed by a federal land assessor. The 1880 correction was signed by a county recorder she didn't recognize with a handwriting that looked. She held both documents under the lamp and compared them carefully, like it might have been produced by the same hand as several of the RC Land and Title payment receipts in the ledger. She was not a handwriting expert. She couldn't say that in a court, but she could say it to herself in the midnight quiet of Ethan Ward's office, with the lamp burning low and the creek audible faintly in the distance. She set both documents down on the desk. She looked at them for a long time. Then she picked up her pen and wrote at the bottom of her working paper, "Forged. Find proof." She found him at the creek the next morning before breakfast, standing at the ford with his boots off and his jeans rolled up, which was such an unexpectedly human thing to discover about a man who presented himself as entirely self-contained that she stopped for a moment before announcing herself. "Mr. Ward," she said. He turned. He didn't look embarrassed, which she appreciated. "Miss Dawson." He looked at the papers she was carrying. "You found something?" "Yes," she said. "I need you to sit down." "I'm standing in a creek." "I'm aware. I need you to sit down anyway." He came out of the creek and sat on the bank, and she stood in front of him and told him everything she had found, in order without editorial, the way she would present a column of figures, clearly, completely, with all the relevant numbers, and none of the noise. She told him about RC land and title. She told him about the $870. She told him about the 2 surveys and the discrepancy in the boundary line and the handwriting that matched. She told him about Victor Cain. He listened without interrupting. His face during this recitation went through several things. She watched them move across it like weather across open country. Disbelief first, then recognition, the particular look of a man who has been suspecting something and is now being told it out loud. Then something harder and quieter that settled in and stayed. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. 8 months, he said finally. Holt left 8 months ago. Yes, 8 months ago is when the payments started escalating. The jump from 40 to 110, that was 8 months ago. Yes, she said. I noticed that. Holt, he said. The word came out flat and contained in the way that a man says a name when he's working very hard not to say anything else alongside it. I can't prove Holt was involved, she said. I can't prove the surveys are forged, not yet. What I can do is show you where the money went and establish a timeline that raises questions a judge would have to answer. He looked up at her. A judge? If the boundary documents are fraudulent, this needs to go to a court. You can't fix this by paying more money or by confronting Cain directly. He works through systems, and the only way to beat a system is with a better system. You sound very certain about that, he said. I've been watching my father lose to systems like this my entire life, Clara said. The difference is that my father never understood what he was losing to. He thought it was bad luck. It wasn't bad luck. It was a man like Victor Cain finding the weakness in the paperwork and pulling on it. She paused. You're not my father, and I intend to find the weakness in Cain's paperwork and pull on it. Ethan Ward looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen from him before. Not the careful assessment, not the controlled reserve. Something more direct than either of those. Something that looked almost, she thought, like a man recognizing something he'd been looking for without quite knowing it. Why are you doing this? He said. You asked me that before, she said, in a different form. I'm asking it again. She considered the question seriously because it deserved a serious answer. Because it's the right problem, she said. Because the numbers are there, and they tell a clear story, and the story can be proven if you do it right. Because, she stopped, looked at the creek, looked back at him. Because someone needs to pull on the right thread, and I'm the person who can see where it is. He nodded slowly. All right, he said. What do you need? I need to go to the county recorder's office in Cheyenne, she said. I need access to the original land grant documents and the full recording history on this property. And I need you to understand that what I find might be complicated, and the process of fixing it will definitely be complicated, and there is a real possibility that Cain is already aware that someone is looking. Why would he be aware of that? Because Holt left clean, she said. And people who leave clean usually leave because someone told them to. Ethan Ward stood up from the bank and rolled his jeans back down and put his boots back on, and when he straightened up, there was something settled in his face, the way a man looks when he's made a decision and is not going to unmake it. When do we leave? He said. We, she said. You're not going to Cheyenne alone, he said. Simply. Not as an order, she noticed the difference. As a statement of fact, the way he might say the creek runs east, or it'll rain before Thursday. Just a thing that was true. She wanted to argue on principle. She also recognized that having Ethan Ward in a county recorder's office with his name on the land grant would make certain conversations significantly easier. "Tomorrow morning," she said. "Early. I want to be there when they open." "I'll tell Sam," he said. She turned to go back to the house. She had taken 3 steps when he said behind her, "Miss Dawson." She stopped and turned. "Thank you," he said, "for finding it." She looked at him for a moment. "I haven't fixed it yet," she said. "No," he said, "but you saw it. That matters." She turned back toward the house and kept walking, and she did not let herself think too much about the way he'd said that, the particular weight of it, a man who understood that seeing a thing clearly was its own form of value. She did not let herself think about it because she had work to do, and Cheyenne was a day's ride, and she needed to prepare her documents, and she was absolutely not the kind of woman who let a sentence from a man reorganize her priorities. She thought about it anyway.
Jata Ben.
The road to Cheyenne in summer heat was long and honest about itself. No shade to speak of the kind of sun that didn't let you forget it was there, and enough dust that by the time they reached the edge of the city, Clara's gray dress had turned the color of the road. She didn't care. She was thinking about the documents in her satchel and the questions she needed to ask and the exact order in which she needed to ask them, and she was rehearsing the conversation, the way she rehearsed everything, silently, precisely anticipating the objections and preparing the answers. Ethan rode beside her and did not try to fill the silence, which she appreciated more than she would have said out loud. At one point, about 2 hours out from Cheyenne, she said, "What do you know about Cain personally, not his business? Him." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Met him once," he said. 2 years ago. He came out to the ranch, said he was interested in buying. I told him I wasn't selling. He smiled the whole time, the whole conversation. Never stopped smiling. Said he understood completely, and he respected my position, and he hoped I'd reconsider when the time was right. "And then the payment started," Clara said. "And then the payment started," he said. "I didn't connect them. I should have." "You trusted Holt," she said. "I trusted Holt," he said in the same flat, contained tone he'd used at the creek. "Have you seen Cain since?" "Once. In town about 6 months ago. He was talking to a man outside the bank. Didn't see me. I watched him for a few minutes." He paused. He was the same, smiling, like a man who knows exactly where every piece is on the board and has already decided where they're all going to end up. "He hasn't accounted for all the pieces," Clara said. No, she said. "He hasn't accounted for me." Ethan looked at her from the side, and she was looking at the road ahead, and she did not see his expression, which was perhaps fortunate, because she might have let herself think about it more than was productive. The Laramie County Recorder's office smelled like old paper and linseed oil and bureaucratic permanence, and the man behind the counter, a thin, precise individual named Mr. Alcott, looked at Clara with the particular expression of a man who was not accustomed to women arriving at his counter with demands regarding land records. She put the documents on the counter. "I need the complete recording history on this parcel," she said, and gave him the land grant number she had memorized from the original survey. "Every document recorded against this property since the original 1871 grant. Every amendment, every correction, every lien, every encumbrance." Mr. Alcott looked at the documents. He looked at Ethan. He looked at Clara. "And who exactly are you, ma'am?" "I'm the person keeping the books for Ward's Crossing," Clara said. "Mr. Ward is the property owner. You'll see his name on the grant." She set her finger on it. "We need the complete history. Today, if possible." Mr. Alcott looked at Ethan, who said, "What she said," with a brevity that seemed to communicate his full position on the matter. Alcott went to the files. He came back with a stack of documents and set them on the counter, and Clara went through them with the systematic precision of a woman who has been waiting for exactly this moment, turning each page carefully, reading the recording stamps, checking the signatures, building the chain. She found it on the 7th document. The 1880 boundary correction. Recording stamp county seal signature of the recorder, the same one she'd seen on the copy in Ethan's file. She held it under the light and looked at the signature very carefully. Then she pulled out the RC land and title payment receipt from her satchel and put them side by side. Same hand. She was more certain of it now, seeing the original in better light. The particular formation of the capital R. The way the tail of the lowercase d looped back and crossed itself. "Mr. Alcott," she said carefully, "can you tell me who served as county recorder in 1880? Alcott looked slightly affronted, as though she'd asked something impertinent. Naturally, that was Mr. Theodore Marsh. He served from 78 to 82. And where is Mr. Marsh now? A pause. A slight change in Alcott's manner. Something careful entering it. Something that Clara noticed the way she noticed all careful things. "Mr. Marsh passed," he said. "Autumn of 82. Convenient, she thought. Extremely convenient. "And before he passed," she said, keeping her voice entirely neutral, "was there any review of records filed during his tenure? Any audit?" "I beg your pardon. An audit," she said. "A systematic review of recordings made during a specific period to ensure their accuracy and legitimacy." Alcott looked at her as though she had suggested something vaguely offensive. "This office does not—" "I'm not suggesting there was an irregularity," Clara said, which was exactly what she was suggesting. "I'm asking whether the practice exists, whether it's been done." "It has not," Alcott said stiffly. "Then I'd like to request one," she said. "Specifically for documents recorded against the Ward's Crossing grant between January of 1879 and December of 1882. I'd like that request noted in writing today with my name and Mr. Ward's name and the date." Alcott stared at her. Ethan Ward said from beside her very quietly, "Is there a reason that can't be done, sir?" Something about the way he said sir. Not aggressive, just a man asking a yes or no question and indicating that he was going to require an actual answer. Alcott wrote it down. Outside the recorder's office on the boardwalk in the Cheyenne summer heat, Ethan stopped walking and said, "What did you find in there?" "The boundary correction document was filed by the same person who signed the RC land and title receipts," Clara said. "I can't prove it in court yet, but I've now officially requested an audit of all documents from that period, which means the request is on the public record, which means if anyone moves to destroy or alter those documents between now and when an auditor looks at them, it becomes evidence of intent." He looked at her. "You just protected the documents before you'd even told me what you found in them." "Yes," she said. "That's the correct order of operations." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You've done this before." "No," she said. "But I've watched it be done wrong enough times to understand how to do it right." He looked at her with that expression again, the direct one, the one she'd seen at the creek and was becoming grudgingly familiar with. "We need to eat," he said. "Come on." She followed him down the boardwalk, and she was thinking about Theodore Marsh dead in the autumn of 1882, and about Victor Cain's smile, and about the shape of what she was building. The outline of a case, the thread she'd promised herself she'd find. She'd found it. Now she had to pull it without breaking it. And somewhere behind Victor Cain's smile, she was fairly certain a very carefully constructed system was about to become aware that someone was pulling. She was ready for that. She was in fact counting on it. They ate at a place called Morrow's, a long narrow room with tables close together and a menu written on a chalkboard, and Clara ordered coffee and a plate of whatever was hot because she was too busy thinking to care about the specifics. Ethan ordered the same and didn't comment on her distraction, which she appreciated. She spread her working papers on the table between the coffee cups and went through what she had, piece by piece, speaking quietly enough that the men at the neighboring table couldn't follow it. "The audit request buys us time," she said, "but not much. The moment Cain's people see that request on the public record, they'll know someone is looking. They'll move." "Move how?" Ethan said. "Accelerate," she said. Whatever the next step of his plan is, he'll push it forward before we can establish a legal defense. If the forged boundary correction stands as the official record, he can file a claim on the Ford at any time. He's probably already prepared to do it. He was just waiting until the financial pressure on the ranch had built enough that fighting the claim would be too expensive. Ethan set down his coffee cup. "How close is he?" "Closer than you want to know," she said honestly. The payments to RC Land and Title represent a pattern of establishing a financial record of your acknowledgement of the boundary. Every time you paid that fee, you were implicitly confirming the corrected boundary as legitimate. A lawyer could argue that your payment history constitutes acceptance of the 1880 survey. He was quiet. Then, Holt authorized those payments. "Yes. But your signature is on the ranch accounts. Holt acted as your agent. In law, that's the same as you signing it yourself." The silence that followed was the kind that a man sits in when he's calculating damage. She let him sit in it because there was no point in softening the number. It was the number, and he needed to know it. "Can it be undone?" he said finally. "Yes," she said. "But only if we can prove the underlying document that justified the payments was fraudulent. If we can show the 1880 survey was forged, the payments become evidence of fraud, not evidence of acceptance. The entire chain collapses." She paused. "But proving the survey was forged means finding someone who can testify to it. A handwriting expert, another land assessor, someone who knew Theodore Marsh and can speak to whether that signature is genuine." "Marsh is dead," Ethan said. "Marsh is dead," she said. "But his work isn't. He conducted surveys across this county for 4 years. Those surveys are on record. A comparison of authentic Marsh signatures to the one on the 1880 document is a provable thing." She looked at her papers. "I need to find every recorded survey Marsh conducted between 1878 and 1882 and build a sample. Then I need someone qualified to make the comparison." "In Cheyenne. There's a federal land office in Cheyenne," she said. "Federal surveys take precedence over county recordings. If I can get a federal assessor to review the discrepancy between the 1871 grant and the 1880 correction, that review carries legal weight that a county judge can't easily dismiss." Ethan looked at her across the table. "How do you know all of this?" She looked back at him. "I read," she said. "Everything I could find. My father lost land twice to processes he didn't understand. I understood them before I was 18. I just never had land to protect." She paused. "Now I do." He looked at her for a moment longer than was comfortable, and she looked back at him, and neither of them said anything about what she had just said, that she considered this land worth protecting, as though it were her own, because the statement was sitting there between them, and acknowledging it directly would have required a conversation neither of them was quite ready for. "Federal Land Office," he said. "Tomorrow morning." "Yes," she said. "And then I need to go back to Redstone Gulch." "Why?" "Because there is someone there who knew Theodore Marsh," she said. "Someone who might know whether that 1880 document is the kind of thing Marsh would have signed." Ethan waited. "Old Sam worked this county for 40 years, Clara said. "He mentioned Marsh once early on when I asked about the surveys." He stopped himself before he finished the sentence. "I want to know what he stopped himself from saying." Ethan Ward put money on the table for the meal and stood up, and when he looked at her, there was something in his expression that she was learning slowly was not quite respect, because respect was too distant a word for it. It was more like recognition, the look of a man watching someone do a thing he couldn't do himself, and understanding finally exactly how valuable that was. "All right," he said. "Let's go." The Federal Land Office was not accustomed to a woman like Clara Dawson. The assessor on duty, a bearded man named Riley, with ink stains on 3 fingers, and the general manner of a man who had been doing the same careful work for 20 years, and intended to do it 20 more, looked at her documents with the slow, thorough attention of someone who had not survived 2 decades in federal service by being careless. She laid everything out for him. The 1871 grant, the 1880 correction, her timeline, The payment records from the ranch ledger. She did not editorialize. She did not speculate. She laid the documents in chronological order and said, "I would like your professional assessment of whether these two surveys are consistent with standard recording practice in this county during those periods." Riley looked at the documents for a very long time. He looked at them the way she had looked at them under the light, turning them, comparing the paper, the ink, the seal impressions. He said nothing for 6 minutes. She counted. Then he said, "This seal." He pointed to the seal on the 1880 document. "It's a county recorder's seal." "Yes," she said. "The county recorder's seal changed in 1879, he said. "New seal was issued when the county was reorganized. The old seal had 4 stars. The new seal had 5. He pointed to the seal on the document. "This has 4 stars. Clara went very still. "That means," she said carefully, "that this seal predates 1879. "It does," Riley said, "but the document is dated 1880. "It is," Riley said. They looked at each other. Clara heard her own heartbeat with perfect clarity. "Would you be willing to put that in writing," she said, "as a federal assessor's finding?" Riley looked at Ethan, who was standing very quietly to one side, having the good sense to let Clara run this conversation without interference. Then Riley looked back at her. "Yes," he said, "I would." They rode back toward Redstone Gulch the next morning with Riley's written finding in Clara's satchel, and the summer heat was just as brutal as the day before, and the road was just as dusty, and Clara felt something she had not allowed herself to feel. Yet something that was almost but not quite hope. She kept it small. She kept it controlled. Hope was a thing that could be weaponized against you if you let it grow too large too fast. "The seal finding changes everything," she said, more to herself than to Ethan, working through it as she spoke. "It's physical evidence, not handwriting interpretation. It's objective. The seal either has 4 stars or 5. It can't be argued as a matter of opinion." "Cain will argue it was a clerical error," Ethan said. "He can try," Clara said. "A clerical error using an outdated seal on a document that conveniently repositions a property boundary to exclude the most valuable feature of the land. A judge with any sense will see the pattern." "Cain has friends on the bench," Ethan said. She looked at him. "How many?" "One that I know of for certain. District judge named Haverford. Had dinner with Cain in Cheyenne twice that I heard about." "Then we don't go to Haverford," she said. "We go to the territorial court. Federal jurisdiction. Riley's finding is a federal finding. It supports federal review of a federal land grant. We bypass the county system entirely." Ethan was quiet. Then, with something that might have been the early formation of something she could only call admiration. "You already thought of that." "I thought of it last night," she said. "While you were asleep." "You didn't sleep." "I slept 4 hours. That was sufficient." She looked at the road ahead. "What I need now is Sam." Sam Briggs did not look surprised when they rode into the yard. He looked like a man who had been waiting for them to come back with a different expression than the one they'd left with, which they had, and who had been doing his own thinking in the meanwhile. He listened to everything Clara told him without interrupting, which told her he had already suspected most of it. When she finished, she said, "You knew Theodore Marsh?" Sam turned the cedar stick in his hands. "Worked alongside him twice," he said. "Survey crew summer of 1879 and spring of 1880. "What was he like?" "Careful," Sam said immediately. "Meticulous. Man who checked his own numbers 3 times before he wrote them down. Took pride in his work. Real pride, not just the talking kind." He paused. "Never once in 2 summers of working beside him did I see him cut a corner. Not once." "Would he have used an outdated seal?" Clara said. Sam looked at her sharply. "What?" She told him about the 4 stars versus 5. About the 1879 changeover. About the 1880 document bearing the old seal. Sam sat very still for a long moment. "No," he said. "That's not possible. Marsh was the one who received the new seal. He signed for it himself. He showed it to the whole crew because he was proud of the county's reorganization, thought it meant things were getting more professional. Sam's voice was slower now, heavier. That man would not have used an old seal 1 year after he'd received the new one. That document wasn't made by Marsh. That document was made by someone who had access to the old seal. Who would have had access to the old seal after 1879? Clara said. Recorder's office keeps old equipment in storage, Sam said. Doesn't always destroy it. His jaw tightened. And a man with enough connections in that office could get to storage, could use what was in it, could make a document look older than it was if he needed to, or make it look like Marsh made it, Clara said quietly. Because Marsh was careful and respected, and nobody would question a document if they believed he'd made it. And Marsh was convenient, Sam said with a bitterness in his voice that Clara hadn't heard from him before. Died before anyone could ask him about it. The three of them sat with that for a moment, the full weight of it, the deliberateness of it, how long Victor Cain had been building this. Sam, Clara said, will you testify to what you just told me about Marsh and the seal, about his character and his methods? Sam looked at her for a long time. Then he looked at Ethan, who was watching him with an expression that asked nothing demanded. Nothing just waited. I'm 60 years old, Sam said. Been on this land for 12 of those years. Watched this ranch built from a creek crossing and a prayer. He set the cedar stick down on the fence rail. Yes, I'll testify. Chitwak. 2 days after they returned from Cheyenne, Victor Cain came towards crossing. Clara was in the office when she heard the horse in the yard. She looked out the window, and she recognized him immediately from the description Ethan had given her. Not tall, not imposing in the physical sense, but with a quality of assembled certainty that made a man seem larger than his actual dimensions. He wore a gray suit, summer weight, and a hat that had probably cost more than most men in Redstone Gulch made in a month. He was smiling. Ethan had told her about the smile. She had prepared for it. She stayed in the office and listened. Ward, she heard Cain say from the yard. Warm voice. Genuine sounding. The voice of a man who'd practiced sounding genuine until it was indistinguishable from the real thing. Good to see you. I hope I'm not interrupting. You are, Ethan said. His voice was even. She could hear him working to keep it that way. But you're here, so speak your piece. I'll get right to it then, Cain said. I've become aware that there was a request filed at the county recorder's office in Cheyenne. An audit request pertaining to documents recorded on your property. That's right, Ethan said. I'm curious who filed it, Cain said pleasantly. You don't seem like a man who spends time at county offices. I've been known to surprise people, Ethan said. A pause. Then Cain said, Ward, I want to be honest with you. I've had my eye on this property for some time. You know that. I've made no secret of it. And I think a conversation between us man to man could resolve some of the complications that seem to be developing before they become unpleasant for anyone involved. What kind of conversation? Ethan said. A practical one, Cain said. I'm prepared to offer you a fair price for Ward's Crossing. A generous price accounting for the current uncertainties regarding the eastern boundary. You'd walk away with enough to establish yourself comfortably elsewhere. New start. Clean slate. The eastern boundary isn't uncertain, Ethan said. Another pause. Shorter this time. Something shifting in Cain's manner. Clara could hear it even from inside the house, the very slight recalibration of a man who had encountered unexpected resistance. The county recording from 1880 is fraudulent, Ethan said. Silence. Real silence, not the theatrical kind. That's a serious accusation, Cain said. His voice was still pleasant. Still smooth. But there was something underneath it now, something that wasn't pleasure. It's a documented finding, Ethan said, from a federal land assessor, who's already put it in writing. Clara heard nothing from outside for almost 10 seconds. Then Cain said pleasantly, I see you've had some help. I have, Ethan said. The woman, Cain said. Still pleasant. The one from town. Harlan Dawson's daughter. The way he said it, not quite dismissive, not quite threatening, but holding both possibilities in his mouth and letting Ethan hear them, made something cold and focused settle into Clara's chest. She set down her pen. "She has a name," Ethan said. His voice had changed, still even, but with something underneath it that was not evenness, something that required effort to contain. "Of course she does," Cain said, with a warmth that was a perfect copy of sincerity. "I meant no disrespect, Ward. I'm simply observing that situations like this can become complicated when people without a full understanding of the legal landscape begin involving themselves in property matters. I'd hate to see things become difficult for anyone, especially someone who is a guest, I assume, on your property." He let the word guest do its work. Clara heard it. She understood exactly what it was, a reminder that she had no legal standing, no property, no claim, that she was borrowed space and borrowed time, that she could be made into a liability simply by being named. She stood up from the desk. She walked to the front door and opened it and stepped out into the yard. Cain turned when he heard her. He looked at her with the smile already in place, which told her he'd expected her to appear, which told her the entire speech had been partially designed to draw her out. She filed that information and walked forward until she was standing beside Ethan. "Mr. Cain," she said. "Miss Dawson," he said with a courtesy that was a perfect instrument. "I've heard about you." "I've heard about you too," she said. "Theodore Marsh, R.C. Land and Title, the 1880 survey with the 1878 seal. I've heard quite a lot." The smile stayed on his face. It was a remarkable thing, she thought, how completely he maintained it. Like a man who had long since decided that the smile was armor and had welded it in place. "Those are very specific things to have heard," he said. "I work with specific things," she said. "Numbers, documents, the kind of evidence that a federal court considers reliable." "Federal court," he repeated, still smiling. "You're ambitious." "I'm accurate," she said. "Which in my experience is more useful." He looked at her for a long moment, and she looked back at him, and she held his gaze with the same absolute stillness she had held on the auction platform while the crowd laughed at $40. She had learned a long time ago how to make her face a wall, how to give a man nothing to read in it, how to look at something terrible and show it only quiet. Cain shifted, barely enough to notice if you were watching for it. But she was watching for it. "I hope you understand," he said, "that a finding by a single federal assessor is not in itself sufficient to overturn a recorded county document. These things require time, process. The machinery of the legal system is slow, Miss Dawson. Property matters are resolved over months, sometimes years, and during that time—" He looked around the yard, at the barn, at the outbuildings, at the land in all directions. "During that time, operations continue to be complicated by uncertainty. I understand that you're telling me you intend to make this as slow and expensive as possible," Clara said. "And I want you to understand that I've already anticipated that and accounted for it." "Have you?" he said. "Yes," she said. "I also want you to understand something else." She took one step forward. "You built your case on a dead man's reputation and a stolen seal and a bookkeeper who could be paid to leave. Those were your three anchors. The dead man's reputation is now working against you. Samuel Briggs knew Theodore Marsh and will testify to his methods in detail. The seal is documented by federal finding. And the bookkeeper—" She paused. "The bookkeeper left enough behind that I didn't need him." Cain looked at her. The smile was still there. But the eyes behind it, the eyes were doing something different now. Calculating, really calculating, not the performance of it. "You're a remarkable young woman," he said. "I'm a thorough one," she said. "There's a difference." He looked at Ethan. "Ward, my offer stands. Think about it carefully." Then he looked back at Clara, and the smile did something she hadn't seen it do before. It showed its edge. Just for a moment, like a blade shifted to catch the light. "Both of you think carefully." He turned his horse and rode out of the yard at an unhurried pace, the way a man rides who wants you to know that nothing you've said has changed his timeline. Clara watched him go. Ethan stood beside her and watched him go. When the sound of hooves faded, Sam Briggs said from behind them both, "He'll move fast now." "Yes," Clara said. "How fast?" "Fast enough that we need to be faster," she said. She turned back toward the house. "I need paper and a lamp. I'm writing to the territorial court tonight." "Clara," Ethan said. She stopped. He almost never used her given name. She turned around. He was looking at her with the direct expression, the one she'd been learning to navigate, the one that didn't give her the comfortable distance of formality. "Are you all right?" he said. She considered the question. Considered it honestly, the way she did everything. "Yes," she said. "He wanted me to be afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm—" She searched for the right word. "Focused." He nodded slowly. "Focused," he said, as though he were weighing it, finding it accurate. "I've been waiting for a problem like this my whole life," she said. "A problem with a clear shape and a provable answer. The answer exists. I just have to get there before he changes the question." She went inside. She got the paper. She lit the lamp. And outside, somewhere on the road to Cheyenne, Victor Cain was riding fast, and both of them knew it, and neither of them intended to let it matter. 3 days after Cain's visit, the letter arrived. It was addressed to Ethan Ward from the office of a Cheyenne attorney named Whitmore, and it informed him formally that a legal challenge had been filed against the Ward's Crossing property, claiming adverse possession of the eastern parcel, the parcel that included the ford, based on the 1880 boundary correction. Clara read it 3 times. Adverse possession. Cain wasn't waiting for the audit. He'd jumped directly to a legal claim using the existing fraudulent record as his basis, forcing Ethan to respond in county court, where Judge Haverford presided. She set the letter down on the desk very carefully, the way a person sets down something they want to think about without breaking. "He's trying to force us into Haverford's court," she said. "Can he do that?" Ethan said. "Technically, yes," she said. "Adverse possession claims are filed at the county level. If we respond in county court, we're in front of Haverford. If Haverford rules in Cain's favor, before we can get the federal review established, the county ruling creates a presumption that becomes much harder to overturn." "So he's racing us," Ethan said. "He's been racing us since the moment he saw the audit request," she said. "We were already in a race. This is just him saying so out loud." She stood up. "We need a lawyer, not Haverford's system, someone who practices at the territorial level." "I don't know territorial lawyers," Ethan said. "I do," she said. "Or rather, I know of one." She went to her satchel and dug through it until she found a folded newspaper page she had taken from Cheyenne, something she'd picked up and saved without knowing exactly why, the way she sometimes saved things that felt useful without yet knowing their use. It was a notice in the legal announcement section. An attorney named Margaret Sutton, newly admitted to practice in Wyoming Territory, specializing in land and property disputes. The only female attorney in the territory, the notice mentioned, which was why Clara had saved it. She held it out to Ethan. He read it. He looked up at her. Something moved across his face that might in a different kind of man have been amusement, not at the situation, but at the particular rightness of it. "A woman lawyer," he said. "One who almost certainly understands," Clara said, "what it means to have your legitimacy questioned by a system that was built without you in mind." Ethan looked at the notice for another moment. Then he folded it and put it in his pocket. "I'll ride to Cheyenne tomorrow," he said. "We'll ride," she said. He looked at her. "She needs to meet me," Clara said. "She needs to see the documents. She needs to understand what I've built. A lawyer working from second-hand information is half a lawyer." She paused. "No offense to lawyers." He almost smiled. Almost. "None taken on their behalf," he said. Margaret Sutton's office was on a side street in Cheyenne, 2 rooms above a tailor's shop, and she was not what Clara had expected, which was something she had to admit to herself, because Clara prided herself on accurate expectations. She had expected a woman of a certain severity, the kind of severity a woman builds around herself when she has spent years in rooms where she was not expected and had learned to make herself architecturally unavoidable. Sutton had some of that. But she also had a directness that was almost physical. A quality of listening that made Clara feel for possibly the first time in her life that someone was keeping up with her. Clara laid out everything. Documents, timeline, Riley's finding, Sam's testimony, the adverse possession claim, Haverford's connection to Cain, the forged seal, the payment history. Sutton said nothing until she was completely done. Then she said, "How long did it take you to build this?" 17 days, Clara said. Sutton looked at her. "From a ranch's disordered books." "Yes." "You have no legal training." "No." "But you understand that the seal finding is the cornerstone," Sutton said. "That everything else supports it, but the seal is the thing that proves intent rather than error." "Yes," Clara said. "An error doesn't involve using an outdated instrument specifically. An error uses whatever's at hand. Using the old seal means accessing stored equipment. That's deliberate. That's planning." Sutton looked at the documents for another long moment. Then she said, "Miss Dawson, I want to be honest with you about the difficulty of what you're asking. Bypassing county court to pursue federal review is not impossible, but it requires establishing federal jurisdiction clearly and immediately. If Haverford moves to accelerate the adverse possession hearing before we can get federal standing, we could find ourselves responding in his court on his timeline." "I know," Clara said. "Cain will have the better local network, better connections to the scheduling process. He can push that hearing date forward." "I know," Clara said. "And in the event we lose at the county level?" "We won't," Clara said. Sutton looked at her. "We won't," Clara said again, "because we're not going to respond to the adverse possession claim in county court at all. We're going to file a federal challenge to the underlying document before Haverford can schedule the hearing. We make the federal challenge the primary proceeding. The adverse possession claim can't be adjudicated until the legitimacy of the document it's based on has been established. One halts the other." Sutton was quiet for a very long moment. Then she said, "That is an elegant use of procedural priority." "It's accurate," Clara said, "which in my experience is more useful than elegant." Sutton looked at her, and something passed between them. Recognition, the particular kind that passes between two people who have been underestimated by the same systems in different rooms. "I'll take the case," she said. She looked at Ethan. "Mr. Ward, I assume you have no objection to Miss Dawson's continued involvement in the strategy." Ethan looked at Clara, then back at Sutton with an expression that Clara did not look at too directly because there was something in it she was not ready to examine in a lawyer's office in Cheyenne with everything still unresolved. "None whatsoever," he said. "Good," Sutton said. She picked up her pen. "Let's get to work." The ride back to Redstone Gulch that evening was quieter than the previous ones. Not an uncomfortable quiet, something different. Something that had a weight to it that Clara was increasingly aware of the way you become aware of weather when it's changing. Halfway back, Ethan said, "You've been running on 4 hours of sleep for 3 weeks." "I've been fine," she said. "I didn't say you weren't fine," he said. "I said 4 hours." She looked at the road. "When this is over, I'll sleep more." "Clara," he said. She looked at him. There it was again, the directness of her name in his voice, the thing she had no good system for managing. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Any of it. You came here for a room and a reasonable arrangement. This is a long way past that." She was quiet for a moment. The horses moved through the summer evening, and the light was going gold and low, and somewhere ahead, Redstone Creek was waiting. "I know," she said. "So why?" She thought about the auction platform. She thought about $40. She thought about her father's smile, and the crowd's laughter, and the bend in the road she had fixed her eyes on, because she needed something stable to look at. She thought about a green ledger with a broken spine and numbers that told a story nobody had been reading. She thought about what it felt like to finally be given a problem worth solving. "Because I can," she said simply, And because it's right, and because if I walk away from a provable injustice because it became inconvenient. She stopped. Then I was never really the person I thought I was. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You are, you know." "Am what?" "The person you think you are," he said. "You've been that person the whole time. The rest of the world just hadn't caught up yet." Clara looked at the road ahead, at the gold light on the dry summer grass, at the cottonwoods coming up in the distance, white and silver green the way they always were. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. But something shifted very quietly, very carefully, in the place where she had been holding everything at a distance since the day she stepped off that platform. Something small. Something that would not stop being there no matter how much she had to do. She let it be there, just for a moment. Then she picked up her pace because Margaret Sutton was filing in the morning, and they had work left to do. And Clara Dawson had never in her life let a moment, however quietly significant, get in the way of the next right thing. She wasn't going to start now. Margaret Sutton filed the federal challenge on a Thursday morning, and by Friday afternoon, Victor Cain's attorney had filed a motion to dismiss it. Clara read the motion at the kitchen table with her coffee going cold beside her and her jaw getting tighter with every paragraph. It was a well-constructed document, she had to give Cain's people that. It argued that the federal land office had no jurisdiction over a county recording dispute, that Riley's finding was an informal assessment rather than an official federal determination, and that the adverse possession claim was a straightforward county matter that should proceed in the appropriate venue. Every argument was technically defensible. Every argument was also wrong in the specific way that wrong things are wrong when they've been carefully dressed to look right. She set the motion down. She picked up her pen. She wrote 6 pages of response notes in the next 40 minutes, working through each argument and its counter, building the structure, the way she built everything from the foundation up, making sure each layer could hold weight before adding the next. Sam came in halfway through, poured himself coffee, read over her shoulder for a moment, and said, "You arguing law now?" "I'm giving Sutton the arguments," she said. "She argues the law. I find what's provably true. They're a difference. In a fair system, no," she said. "In this one, yes. The law can be shaped by whoever gets there first with the better paperwork. The truth can't be shaped. That's the only advantage we have, and I intend to use it completely." Sam sat down across from her. He looked at her working papers, the timeline she'd built, the document chain, the payment records cross-referenced to dates. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You know what Marsh used to say, old Theodore?" "No," she said, still writing. "He said a survey is only as good as its witness. You can draw any line you want on a map, but if someone was standing there when the line was drawn, someone who remembers the map can't lie to that person." Sam turned his coffee cup in his hands. "I was standing there, Clara, not at the recording, but I was in this county. I know what Marsh's work looked like. I know what it didn't look like." She looked up. "I know, Sam." "I'm just saying," he said. "I'm ready. When the time comes, I'm ready." She looked at him, this old permanent man, the kind of face that looked like it had been there a long time and intended to stay, and she felt something she didn't entirely know what to do with. Not quite gratitude, because gratitude was too small for it. Something more like the feeling of discovering solid ground underfoot after a long time of uncertain footing. "Thank you," she said. He nodded and went back to his coffee, and she went back to her notes, and the morning moved forward the way mornings do when there is work left in them. Sutton filed the response to the dismissal motion on Monday. On Wednesday, the territorial judge assigned to the federal challenge a man named Aldrich from the Northern District who had a reputation for patience and a complete indifference to local political arrangements, denied Cain's motion to dismiss. Clara read the ruling standing up at the desk because she had been standing when the courier arrived, and her legs refused to sit down until she'd read the whole thing. The federal challenge would proceed. The adverse possession claim in county court was stayed pending resolution of the federal question. She sat down. She put both hands flat on the desk. She breathed. Ethan appeared in the doorway. He looked at her face and said, "Good news." "The stay is granted," she said. "Haverford can't move forward until Aldrich rules." Ethan came into the room and sat in the chair across the desk and looked at her with an expression that was not quite celebration. He was not a man who celebrated early. Which she had come to understand was wisdom rather than reserve, but something that was the shape of relief, filling in around a frame that had been holding tension for weeks. "Cain's going to appeal," she said. "Yes," he said. "He's going to argue to a higher court that the stay is improper. He'll try to get the adverse possession claim back in front of Haverford while we're still building the federal case." "How long does that take?" "The appeal 2 to 3 weeks minimum." She looked at her papers. "Which means we have 2 to 3 weeks to find everything else we need. Once we're in front of Aldrich, we need to be complete. No gaps. No questions we can't answer." "What's still missing?" he said. "The money," she said. "I can prove the document is forged. I can prove the payments were made under false pretense. What I haven't been able to prove yet is the direct connection between RC Land and Title and Victor Cain personally. The entity is registered, but the registration names a proxy, a man named Aldous Fenner, who appears to be a lawyer in Cain's employ." She tapped her pen against the desk. "If Fenner testifies that the entity is his and Cain has no involvement, we have a gap. Cain stays one step removed." Ethan was quiet. "How do you close the gap?" "I need the bank records," she said. "RC Land and Title has an account at the Redstone Gulch Savings and Loan. If the money flowing into that account can be traced back to Cain's personal holdings, the proxy collapses. But bank records are not public, and the bank manager—" She paused. "Horace Penny. He's been in Cain's pocket for years, according to Sam." "Sam told you that, last week," she said. "Apparently, it's generally understood in Redstone Gulch, just not documented anywhere." She set down her pen. "I need someone inside that bank who isn't Penny." "There's a teller," Ethan said slowly. "Young man named Garrett. Started there about a year ago. His family's got a small farm north of town. Good people. He came to me once about a grazing arrangement for their cattle." He paused. He was uncomfortable, like a man who wanted to say something else but didn't know if he should. Clara looked at him. "You think he knows something?" "I think he works in a bank where things happen that bother him," Ethan said, "and he's been waiting for someone to give him a reason to say so." She stood up. "Then we need to give him a reason." They rode into Redstone Gulch the next morning, and it was the first time Clara had been back to town since the day of the auction, which she had not allowed herself to think about too directly, because she needed to be focused, and the auction had a way of pulling her attention toward things that didn't help. She noticed it anyway. The platform was still there outside Hargrove's general store. Gus Pell was behind his usual counter. The people on the main street recognized her. She could see it, the double take, the shift of expression, the quick look away. She was the woman who had been sold for $40 and had left with Ethan Ward and had not come back, and now she was back, and she was not the same. She kept her eyes forward and walked beside Ethan toward the bank. Garrett was at the teller window, a young man early 20s with the kind of face that showed everything it was thinking, despite clear efforts to the contrary. When he saw Ethan, something moved through his expression that was exactly what Ethan had described. Discomfort. And underneath it, something that wanted to be relief. "Mr. Ward," he said. "Garrett," Ethan said. "This is Miss Dawson. She's been handling my accounts." Garrett looked at Clara. He looked at the papers she was carrying. He looked back at Ethan. "Is there somewhere private we could talk?" Clara said quietly. "Not about your accounts here, about something else." A long pause. Garrett looked toward the back office where Horace Penny presumably existed, and then looked back at them. "My lunch is at noon," he said. "There's a bench behind the feed store." "We'll be there," Clara said. At noon behind the feed store, Garrett sat with his hands between his knees and his lunch uneaten beside him and said, "I don't want to lose my job." I understand, Clara said. I'm not asking you to do anything official yet. I'm asking you what you know. He was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that is deciding, not evading. There's an account, he said. RC Land and Title. Penny manages it personally, doesn't let me near it. But I do the deposit ledger at end of week, and the transfers for that account, they don't come from where accounts like that usually come from. Where do they come from? Clara said. There's a trust account in Cheyenne, he said. Cain Family Holdings Trust. He said the name quickly, like something he'd been holding in his mouth too long and needed to release. Every payment that goes into RC Land and Title comes from that trust. I've seen the transfer records. Penny signs them, but the originating institution is Cheyenne First Federal, and the trust is its Cain's. I know it's Cain's because when the first transfer came in 18 months ago, Penny got a telegram that same morning, and he left it on his desk, and I saw the name at the top. Clara did not move, did not change her expression. Did you keep that telegram? No, he said. I didn't know. Then I didn't know what to do with it. I've been thinking about it since. Have there been other communications? Other documents you've seen? He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I made a record, he said. Every transfer, dates, amounts, originating trust. I've been writing them down for 3 months in my own book at home because I knew something was wrong, and I didn't know who to tell. Clara took the paper. She unfolded it. She looked at it. It was meticulous. Dates, amounts, trust designation. Every entry in small, careful handwriting. It matched her ledger records exactly, and every single transfer originated from Cain Family Holdings Trust. She looked up at Garrett. You understand what this means? Yes, he said. It means Penny's been facilitating it, and it means Cain's directly connected. He looked at his uneaten lunch. It also means if Cain finds out I have this, I'm not just out of a job. I know, Clara said. Are you willing to testify to what you've seen? A long silence. A young man doing the arithmetic of his own courage. My family's farm, he said, north of town. If Cain comes after us... He won't have time, Clara said. What you've just given me closes the last gap in a case that's already in front of a federal judge. Cain is about to have significantly more urgent problems than your family's farm. She paused. But I won't pretend there's no risk. There is. I'm asking you to take it because it's right. Garrett looked at Ethan, who had been standing quietly to the side, which was where Ethan tended to stand when Clara was managing something and had it handled. Ward, Garrett said. You trust her. Ethan looked at Clara. Something very simple moved across his face. No complexity in it, no calculation. Just a man saying a true thing. Completely, he said. Garrett nodded. Then yes, he said. I'll testify. Clara sent everything to Sutton by courier that same evening. Garrett's records, her own ledger analysis, the complete money trail from Cain Family Holdings Trust through RC Land and Title to the fraudulent payments against Ward's Crossing. She sat up until 2 a.m, writing the accompanying analysis, laying out the chain link by link, making each connection explicit and provable. When she finally set down her pen, her hand was cramping, and the lamp was low, and the house was completely quiet. She heard footsteps in the hall, then a knock at the office door. Clara, Ethan said from the other side. Still working, she said. I know, he said. Done now. She looked at the papers on the desk. Yes, she said. For tonight. He opened the door. He was holding 2 cups of coffee, which she had not expected, and he held one out to her, and she took it, and they sat her in the desk chair, him in the chair across from it, and drank coffee in the 2 o'clock quiet, which was the kind of quiet that exists only in the very late night, when everything that can be done has been done and you're sitting with what's left. He's going to know Garrett talked, Ethan said. Yes, she said. Not yet. But once Sutton files the updated evidence, Cain's lawyers will see Garrett's name and they'll know. How long before that happens? Sutton files Friday. Cain's people will receive it by Monday at the latest. Then we have until Monday, he said. To do what? He looked at her directly, and there was something in it, the particular quality of his attention, the way it settled on her without moving, without the sliding quality that most people's attention had. Nothing, he said. To just be here. Before Monday. She didn't know exactly what to say to that. She drank her coffee. He drank his. You know what no one in this county has ever asked me, she said. What? Whether I was all right, she said. Not the way you asked it that day in the yard either. I mean genuinely, as the first question. Not after something went wrong, just as a matter of interest. He was quiet for a moment. Are you? He said. All right. She thought about it honestly. I'm better than I was, she said. Better than I've been in a long time. Maybe better than I ever was because I'm doing something that matters and I can see the shape of it clearly. She looked at her coffee cup. But I'm also... She searched for it. I'm aware that when this is over, the reason for me to be here is resolved. The work is done. The room was for the arrangement, and the arrangement was work. He looked at her steadily. Is that how you see it? It's how I defined it, she said. At the start, I was very clear about the terms. You were, he said. You were extremely clear about the terms. So were you, she said. I was, he said. And I've been thinking that the terms were short-sighted. She looked at him. On my part, he said. The terms were short-sighted on my part. She held his gaze. Ethan, she said carefully, because she was a woman who was careful with things that could be broken. I need to finish this first. I know, he said. I'm not asking you not to. I need to be very sure that I know what I'm doing and why, she said. That it's not gratitude or proximity, or the fact that you're the first person who ever looked at me without deciding what to think before they'd finished looking. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I reckon that's a fair thing to need. Yes, she said. It is. They sat with that in the 2 o'clock quiet, and the coffee got cold, and neither of them moved. Monday came with a telegram. It arrived before breakfast, and Clara read it, and she went to find Ethan immediately. Cain filed the appeal, she said. The appellate motion is in. He's arguing the stay is improper, and the adverse possession claim should proceed in county court before the federal question is resolved. She handed him the telegram. He got it in faster than I expected. How much faster? By about 4 days, she said. He must have had it prepared and waiting before Sutton even filed the federal challenge. He anticipated we'd win the stay. She looked at the telegram in his hands. He's been ahead of us in time, even when he's behind us in evidence. He knows the system faster than we do. Can Sutton respond? She's already responding, Clara said. She telegraphed this morning before she sent this to us. But the appellate panel has to convene, and that takes time, and in that window, Haverford could potentially hold the adverse possession hearing anyway if he decides the county claim is independent. She paused. We need to get to Cheyenne. Today. Clara. Today, she said. We need to be in front of Sutton today and in front of Aldrich if possible. If Aldrich will see us directly and hear the evidence in person, the appeal becomes moot. He's the federal judge, he takes precedence. Haverford can't move while Aldrich is actively hearing the matter. Ethan looked at her. You're asking Aldrich to hold an immediate hearing. I'm asking Sutton to ask him, she said. With a complete evidence package that makes waiting seem unreasonable. She was already gathering papers. We have the money trail, the seal finding, the forged document chain, Sam's testimony prepared Garrett's records. We have everything. We just need 1 day in front of the right judge. And if Aldrich says no, she looked at him steadily. Then we go to Haverford's court and we win there. You said Haverford. I said Haverford is connected to Cain, she said. I did not say we can't win in his court. We can. The evidence is too clean to suppress without consequences Haverford won't want. He's corrupt, not stupid. If the evidence is presented completely and publicly, She paused. Witnesses in a public courtroom. Everything on the record. Haverford will not rule against evidence that everyone in the room has seen. The risk to him is too high. She pulled on her coat. I'd rather have Aldrich, but I'll take Haverford if I have to. Ethan Ward looked at her for a moment. Then he turned and called toward the yard. Sam, saddle 2 horses. They rode hard to Cheyenne, and Sutton met them in her office, looking like a woman who had also not slept adequately, which was the only thing Clara had in common with most people, and she appreciated finding it. Aldrich, Sutton said before Clara could speak. I already sent the request this morning. I told him we have a complete evidence presentation and we need 48 hours notice, not weeks. Will he grant it? Clara said. He's seen Riley's finding, Sutton said. He took the case specifically because the seal issue is federal in nature, a federal land instrument being undermined by county-level fraud. He's not going to sit on this if I tell him we're ready now. Tell him, Clara said. Sutton reached for her pen. Already done, she said, and held up a letter sealed. Courier goes in 20 minutes. Clara sat down. For the first time in a week, she felt something in her shoulders that might have been the beginning of the end of the tension she'd been carrying. Not gone, not yet, but shifting. Sutton looked at her across the desk. Miss Dawson, she said, you've built something remarkable here. I want you to know that. Whatever happens in court, the work you've done is significant. It's not done yet, Clara said. No, Sutton agreed. But I want you to know it because the people doing the work often don't hear that until it's over. She paused. You deserve to hear it while it's still happening. Clara looked at her hands on the desk. She looked at the papers spread between them. She thought about the auction platform and $40, and her father's smile and the bend in the road she had kept her eyes on. She thought about where the road had led. Thank you, she said, simply, without qualification. Aldrich agreed to hear the matter. The notice came back within a day, an emergency federal hearing scheduled for Thursday, 2 days away in the Cheyenne Federal Courthouse. The adverse possession claim in Haverford's court stayed pending the outcome. When the notice arrived at Ward's Crossing, and Clara read it aloud in the kitchen, Sam Briggs put down his coffee cup and said, That's it, she said. It's a good he said. Ethan said nothing. He was looking at Clara with an expression she recognized by now, the direct one, the certain one. And he reached across the table and put his hand over hers for exactly 2 seconds. Which was not long, which was enough. Which was exactly calibrated to what she could accept without losing her focus. And she thought that this was the thing about him that she had not expected and could not quite account for with numbers. He always seemed to know how much was enough. The night before the hearing, Clara could not sleep. She lay in the east bunkhouse room, with its cedar smell and its window looking toward the creek, and she went through everything in her mind, every document, every date, every number, every argument Cain's lawyers would make, and every answer she had prepared for Sutton to give. She went through it twice, found nothing missing, found nothing weak. She got up and sat at the small table by the window and looked at the dark outside. She thought about Thursday. She thought about walking into a federal courthouse and being Clara Dawson, the woman from the auction, the woman from the broken-down Dawson house, the large woman in the gray dress who people in Redstone Gulch had decided was a type rather than a person. She thought about what it would feel like to stand up in that room and prove that a provable truth is stronger than a carefully constructed lie, no matter how long the lie has been standing. She was not afraid. She was something else, something she didn't have a precise word for. The feeling of a structure you've built being tested for the first time by real weight. The feeling of finding out finally whether the foundation holds. She believed it would hold. But believing and knowing were different things, and Thursday was going to be the difference. Outside, the summer night moved over Redstone Creek, and somewhere in the main house, Ethan Ward was presumably not sleeping either, and Clara Dawson sat with her hands folded and her mind absolutely clear and counted the hours until morning. They rode into Cheyenne before dawn. The federal courthouse was a serious building, the kind of building that had been put there deliberately as a statement about what the law was supposed to be when it was working correctly. Clara looked at it as they approached and felt something resolve inside her that had been working toward resolution for weeks. Sutton met them on the steps. She looked at Clara's face and said, "Ready?" "Yes," Clara said. "Cain will be inside," Sutton said, "with 2 attorneys. They'll argue procedural issues, first try to establish that Aldrich lacks jurisdiction." "They're wrong," Clara said. "They know that," Sutton said. "They're buying time and hoping something in our presentation is weak enough to exploit." "Nothing is," Clara said. Sutton looked at her for a moment with the expression of a woman who knew what it had cost to be able to say that with that particular certainty. "No," she said. "Nothing is." She straightened her jacket. "Let's go." Clara walked up the steps of the federal courthouse with Ethan Ward at her side, and Samuel Briggs behind her, and her satchel of documents against her hip, and she walked through the doors, and the cool interior closed around her, and ahead of them, the courtroom waited. Victor Cain was already seated at the opposing table. He turned when they entered. He looked at Clara. The smile was there, precise assembled, that perfect copy of warmth. She looked back at him without expression. She sat down. She opened her satchel. She set the documents on the table in the order she had determined 3 weeks ago, when she first saw the shape of what she was building. And the hearing began. Aldrich was exactly what his reputation suggested, patient, thorough, and possessed of a complete absence of interest in social dynamics that had nothing to do with evidence. He was perhaps 55 with reading glasses he removed and replaced constantly. And when he spoke, his voice had the quality of a man who had said important things so many times he no longer needed to signal their importance. Cain's attorneys argued jurisdiction for 40 minutes. Aldrich listened completely and then said, "The federal land grant establishes federal interest in this property. The integrity of recording against that grant is a federal question. Motion denied. Proceed." Clara felt Sutton's slight exhale beside her. The evidence went in piece by piece. Riley's seal finding, first objective, physical, irrefutable. Aldrich looked at both documents side by side for a long time. His expression gave nothing away, but he looked at them long enough that Clara was certain he was seeing what she had seen. Then the payment records. Then Garrett's transfer documentation, which connected RC land and title directly to Cain Family Holdings Trust. Garrett was called to testify, and he testified clearly and without hesitation in the voice of a young man who had made a decision and was done deliberating about it. Cain's attorneys cross-examined him, sharply tried to characterize his records as personal interpretation, rather than official banking records tried to establish that he had acted outside his professional authority in making them. Garrett held steady. "I recorded what I saw," he said. "Those are the transfer originations as they appear in the bank's internal records. I have the same access to those records that my position requires me to have." Then Sam Briggs took the stand. He was the most natural witness Clara had ever seen, a man with nothing to perform, who simply told the truth in the plain language of a person who had been telling the truth for 60 years and found it easier than the alternative. He described Theodore Marsh. He described the seal changeover. He described with patient and specific detail the standards Marsh applied to his work and the absolute impossibility in his professional assessment of Marsh having used an outdated seal on an 1880 document. Cain's attorneys tried to dismiss him as a laborer with no formal credentials. Sam looked at them with the mild interest of a man watching something he's seen before. "I worked beside the man for 2 summers, he said. "I don't need credentials to know what I watched him do and what I didn't." Aldrich said, "I'll hear the witness." And then Sutton stood up. Clara had given her everything, every piece, every connection, every thread. And Sutton assembled it into a clear and devastating architecture, the way a person does when they have been given strong materials and know exactly what to build. She traced the money from Cain Family Holdings Trust through RC land and title to the fraudulent payments. She showed how those payments created a false record of boundary acceptance. She showed how the boundary acceptance was anchored to a document that bore a physically impossible seal. She showed how the document had been filed during the tenure of a recorder who was now dead and could not be questioned. She showed how the recorder's death predated the discovery of the fraud by 2 years. She showed how the scheme had been designed from the beginning to be untraceable by a ranch owner who trusted his bookkeeper. Mr. Cain did not commit fraud, Sutton said in the voice of a woman saving the most precise thing for last. On paper. That is the design. Every instrument in this scheme was signed by a proxy recorded by an intermediary and executed through an entity that appears on no document with Mr. Cain's name attached. She paused. But the money did not lie. The money came from Cain Family Holdings Trust and went every time to the same entity on the same schedule, producing the same fraudulent result. Money, unlike paperwork, does not care what name you put on it. It goes where it goes, and it went here, and it went for this purpose, and the evidence of that is before this court completely and without gap. Silence in the courtroom. Cain's lead attorney stood. Your Honor, the connection between Mr. Cain personally and the RC land and title entity is circumstantial at best. The transfer records are not circumstantial, Sutton said. They are documentary. A teller's personal notes, corroborated by bank transfer designations that are part of the official record, Sutton said, which we have subpoenaed, which are in this court's possession, which Mr. Penny as bank manager declined to contest when served. Clara had not known Sutton had subpoenaed Penny's records. She felt something that was the exact shape of hearing a door close on the last exit. Cain's attorney sat down. Aldrich looked at the documents for a long time. He looked at Cain. He looked at Sutton. He looked at Clara sitting at the plaintiff's table, hands folded, completely still, looking back at him. I have heard the evidence, Aldrich said. I will take a brief recess and return with a ruling. He left the bench. Clara did not move. Ethan, seated behind her, leaned forward and said very quietly, Clara. She turned. You did it, he said. He hasn't ruled yet, she said. I know, he said. You still did it. She turned back to face the bench. She waited. The courthouse was very quiet in the particular way that rooms become quiet when everyone in them is holding something they're not ready to put down yet. 20 minutes later, Aldrich returned. He sat down. He removed his reading glasses. He put them back on. He looked at the room. The 1880 boundary correction document is hereby determined to be a fraudulent instrument, he said. Its recording is void. The eastern boundary of Ward's Crossing is confirmed as established in the federal land grant of 1871. The adverse possession claim filed in Laramie County District Court is dismissed with prejudice, as it is predicated on the fraudulent document. The court finds sufficient evidence of a deliberate scheme to defraud the owner of the Ward's Crossing grant and refers this matter to the territorial prosecutor for review of criminal charges. He looked over his glasses. Mr. Cain. Victor Cain was looking at the surface of the table. The smile was gone. Clara looked at his face, at the absence of the smile, at the thing underneath it that had always been underneath it, and was now for the first time visible. It was not what she expected. It was not defiance or rage. It was something smaller and more ordinary than that. It was the face of a man who had believed for a very long time that the system he had built was complete, and was now finding out it had a door he hadn't accounted for. She had been that door. Sutton was gathering papers beside her. Sam Briggs behind her made a sound that was quietly, deeply satisfied. Ethan's hand came forward and rested on the back of her chair, not touching her just there, solid and certain the way he was everything. Miss Dawson, Sutton said quietly. It's done. Clara looked at the bench, at Aldrich replacing his reading glasses for the last time, at the courtroom beginning to rearrange itself around the new shape of what was true. Yes, she said. Her voice was steady, her hands were completely still, and somewhere in her chest, behind every wall she had ever built to keep the uncertain world at a manageable distance, something that had been waiting a very long time finally quietly came to rest. The courthouse steps were warm in the afternoon sun, and Clara stood on them for a moment and did not move. Behind her, the doors had closed on Victor Cain and his two attorneys, and whatever conversation they were having with each other in the wreckage of a scheme that had taken years to build and 47 minutes of testimony to dismantle. Ahead of her, Cheyenne went about its business the way cities do, indifferent to the specific gravity of the moment, unconcerned with the fact that something had just been made right that had been wrong for a long time. Sutton came to stand beside her. "The Territorial Prosecutor's Office will be in contact within the week," she said. "I expect they'll move quickly. A case this documented is the kind prosecutors like. Clear money trail, clear instrument of fraud, clear victim. It writes itself." "Cain will hire the best defense available," Clara said. "He will," Sutton said, "and he'll spend the next 2 years in legal proceedings that will cost him significantly more than Ward's Crossing was ever worth to him. The downstream operations he bought 3 of them are already contingent on the water rights he was trying to secure. Without the Ford, those investments are restructured at best, worthless at worst." She paused. "He's going to spend a great deal of money defending himself from consequences he thought he'd engineered out of existence." Clara looked at the street below. "Good," she said, simply. Sutton allowed herself a small, genuine smile. "Good," she agreed. She held out her hand. "Miss Dawson, it has been the most interesting case I've had in 2 years of practice. I mean that as the highest compliment I know how to give." Clara shook her hand. "Thank you," she said, "for believing the evidence." "You made it impossible not to," Sutton said. She nodded to Ethan, who was standing a few steps below, with Sam, both of them, in the particular posture of men who had just watched something large conclude and were still absorbing it. Then she went back inside, because she was a woman who had more cases and did not stop moving when one ended. Clara came down the steps. Sam looked at her and touched the brim of his hat. "Miss Clara," he said, in a tone that contained 60 years of watching things go wrong and the specific satisfaction of watching one go right. "Sam," she said, "you were excellent in there." "Told the truth," he said. "Marsh deserved it." He looked at the street and something moved across his face that was quieter and more private than his usual expression. A man paying a debt to a dead man's memory, small and complete. He deserved better than being used for someone else's lie. "He got better," Clara said. "Today." Sam nodded. He put his hat back on and said he'd see to the horses, which was his way of giving them privacy, a thing she had come to understand about him, that he managed the emotional weather of the people around him with a tactfulness so practiced it barely showed. She and Ethan stood on the courthouse steps in the afternoon heat and looked at each other. "It's done," he said. "Yes," she said. "How do you feel?" She thought about that honestly. She had been thinking in documents and dates and legal procedure for so long that the question of how she felt had been deferred repeatedly, set aside like a task she'd get to when there was time. Now there was time. She wasn't sure she knew how to access the answer. "I feel like a person who built a thing," she said, "and watched it hold weight." She looked at her hands. "I keep waiting for the part where something goes wrong, where I missed something, where it comes apart." "It's not going to come apart," he said. "I know that," she said. "Logically, I know that. The evidence is complete. The ruling is issued. There's nothing to come apart." She paused. "But I've spent 24 years watching things come apart. It's a difficult habit." He came to stand beside her, not in front of her, not making her look up at him, just beside her, which was where he usually was when something important was happening. "You know what I've noticed about you," he said. "Several things, I'd imagine." "You always tell me what's logically true," he said. "Separate from what you feel, like the two live in different rooms." She looked at him. "They do," she said. "That's not a flaw. It's useful." "I know it is," he said. "I'm not saying it's a flaw. I'm saying—" He stopped, looked at the street, looked back at her. "I'm saying I notice when you feel something, even when you're keeping it in the other room. And what I notice right now is that you're proud of what you did and you won't let yourself say so." She opened her mouth, closed it. He was not wrong. I'm allowed to be thorough, she said, without being proud. You're allowed to be both, he said, at the same time, in the same room. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, I'm proud of what we did, all of us. Sam Garrett Sutton, you. She paused. And yes, myself. He nodded. There it is, he said. She almost smiled. Almost. Don't make it a bigger moment than it is. Wouldn't dream of it, he said. And there was something in his voice that was warm and dry and precisely calibrated to make her want to actually smile, which she did briefly before she collected herself. We should start back, she said. Sam will want to get home before dark. Clara, he said. She stopped. Before we go, he said, I want to say something, and I want you to let me finish it. She turned and faced him fully, because he had earned that. When I paid that money in town, he said, and offered you the room, I told you there were no conditions. And there weren't. There still aren't. But I want to be honest with you about something I wasn't honest about then. He looked at her steadily. I didn't do it purely because it was right. I did it because I watched you stand on that platform, and I saw something in you that I didn't have a name for yet. Something. He searched for it. Solid, like a person who had already decided what they were made of, and the rest of the world just hadn't caught up yet. She held his gaze. You said something like that before. I know, he said. I've been saying versions of it because I haven't found the right version yet. He paused. The right version is I saw you before I knew you, and everything I've learned since has only made the first thing more true. Clara was quiet for a long time. She thought about what she had told herself in those early days about distance, about provisional arrangements, about the walls she had built for good reason and intended to keep. She thought about 2 o'clock coffee, and hands held briefly across a kitchen table, and a man who always knew how much was enough. She thought about the fact that she was standing on courthouse steps in Cheyenne, having just done the most significant thing she had ever done in her life, and the person beside her was the reason she had somewhere to do it from. I need to tell you something too, she said. All right, he said. I told myself this was temporary, she said. The room, the work, the arrangement. I told myself I was keeping it temporary because I was being careful, because I was being practical. She looked at him. But I think I was also keeping it temporary because I was afraid that if I let it be something more, it would be taken from me. The way things have been taken before. She paused. I'm not sure I've ever had something good that didn't eventually get taken. He said nothing. He let her finish. But I built this, she said. Not someone else. Me. And it held. And I'm starting to think that maybe the things you build yourself are harder to take. She held his gaze. I'm starting to think I might be ready to build something that isn't temporary. He looked at her with the expression she knew best. Now, not the careful assessment of the early days, not the reserve, but the direct and certain thing that had been emerging gradually, and was now finally fully present. Then stay, he said, simply. Not for the room, not for the work. Stay because you want to. She looked at him for a long moment. The kind of moment a person stands in when a door is open and they're deciding whether what's on the other side is worth the step. Yes, she said. Just that, just yes. He reached out and took her hand, not briefly this time, not 2 seconds calibrated to what she could accept, and she let him. And she held on, and the afternoon moved around them, and the courthouse stood behind them, and somewhere down the street, Sam Briggs was almost certainly pretending very hard to be interested in the horses. They rode home in the long summer evening, and the light was the gold that late afternoon becomes when it's running out of day, and the three of them rode without much talking, because there was a kind of fullness in the quiet that talking would have interrupted. About an hour out from Redstone Gulch, Sam said from beside her, You know Marsh used to say a piece of land knows who tends it. Clara looked at him. Did he? Sam said. Said you could tell the difference between a man who owned land and a man who belonged to it. He looked ahead at the road. You belong to that land, Clara. I knew it 2 days after you arrived. You started fixing things without being asked. That's how you know." She thought about that, about fixing things without being asked: the dish towels, the accounts, the books that nobody had touched properly in 2 years, the fraudulent document chain that had been draining the ranch she had not owned but had protected anyway. "I wasn't raised to have land," she said. "No," Sam said. "You were raised to understand it. That's more useful." She was quiet for a mile. Then she said, "Thank you, Sam, for everything, for testifying, for knowing Marsh, for being the kind of person who writes things down in his own record because he knows something is wrong and wants to be ready." Sam was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you for giving me somewhere to put it." They rode the rest of the way home in the kind of silence that has earned itself. Redstone Gulch knew by the time they arrived that something had happened in Cheyenne. News traveled in small western towns the way water traveled in dry country, fast finding every crack, reaching places you wouldn't expect. By the time Clara and Ethan rode down the main street, there were people looking from doorways and from across the street, and the quality of the looking was different than it had been on auction day. She noticed it, but she didn't perform for it. She rode through town with the same straight back and forward gaze she had had when she rode out of it, and if people were reassessing what they thought they knew about Harlan Dawson's daughter, that was their own business, and she would let them do it privately. Hargrove came out of his store as they passed. He looked at her and opened his mouth. She met his eyes for 1 second and kept riding. At the far end of the main street near the water trough, she saw Gus Pell, the auctioneer, the red-faced man with the bay rum and the bad judgment. He was standing outside the livery, and he had clearly seen her, and was clearly working out what expression to arrange. She did not help him. She kept her eyes on the road out of town. One person did speak to her, a woman she recognized as Mrs. Alderman, the seamstress who stepped off the boardwalk and said quietly, "Miss Dawson, I heard what you did. I want you to know what happened at that auction. I've been ashamed of it since." Clara stopped her horse. She looked at Mrs. Alderman, a woman of about 50 with a direct face and the kind of eyes that had been watching things for a long time and weren't easy to fool. "Thank you for saying so," Clara said. Honestly, without the edge she might have had for anyone else, because the woman had come forward and said the harder thing when she could have looked away, and Clara respected the harder thing. Mrs. Alderman nodded. She looked at Ethan and then back at Clara. And then she said, "You come find me when you want a proper dress made, something that fits right." She said it simply the way a seamstress offers a thing she's good at, and it was the most dignified form of apology Clara had received in Redstone Gulch, and she received it with the dignity it deserved. "I will," she said. "Thank you." They rode on. Harlan Dawson came to Ward's Crossing 4 days after the Cheyenne hearing. Clara saw him from the window. She had been expecting him not in the sense of knowing when, but in the sense of knowing it was inevitable, because Harlan Dawson was a man who moved toward things that had changed without his permission, and wanted to understand them on his terms. She had spent 24 years watching him do it. She went out to the yard before Ethan could. Harlan sat on his horse and looked down at her, and she stood in the yard and looked up at him, and there was a silence between them that had the specific weight of everything that had happened since the auction platform. "Clara," he said. "Pa," she said. He looked older than she remembered. Not much older. A month was not a long time in years, but there was something in his face that had settled downward, like a thing that has been holding itself up for a long time and has finally let go. "Heard about Cheyenne," he said. "Yes," she said. "Heard you took apart Victor Cain in federal court." "Margaret Sutton took him apart," Clara said. "I gave her the pieces." Harlan was quiet for a moment. He looked at the ranch, at the yard, the barn, the outbuildings, the way the land lay in the summer afternoon. "Ward treating you right?" "Yes," she said. "Working conditions fair?" "Yes." Another silence. Harlan turned his hat in his hands. His good hat, the brown one he'd worn to the auction, and the sight of it did something specific in her chest that she acknowledged and did not perform. "I was wrong," he said. What I did. On the platform. He looked at her. I knew it when I did it. Told myself I didn't, but I knew. She looked at him steadily. I know you knew, she said. He flinched. Small movement. Honest one. I don't expect you to. He stopped. Started again. I'm not asking you to make it right. I know I can't make it right. I'm just saying I know what I did, and I'm not going to try to explain it into something smaller than it was. She studied him. She had been afraid of this conversation for weeks, not because she didn't know what she thought, but because she wasn't sure she could say it without it becoming something larger than she wanted it to be in the yard of Ethan Ward's ranch on an ordinary afternoon. But she was a woman who said true things in the correct order, and this was the correct order. You sold me, she said, on a public platform for $40 to cover a debt you made by not paying attention to things you should have paid attention to for 20 years. I was 24 years old, and I was your daughter, and you had run out of other options, and you used me. She paused. That's what happened. I'm not going to call it anything smaller. He nodded. His jaw worked. He did not argue. No, he said. You shouldn't. And I'm not going to tell you I forgive you, she said, because forgiveness is something I have to earn my way toward, and I haven't gotten there yet. I'm being honest with you because dishonesty doesn't help either of us. No, he said again. But I will tell you this, she said. You raised me in a house where I had to figure out everything by myself, and I figured out everything by myself, and that is not entirely a bad outcome. I know how to work. I know how to think. I know how to read a document and find the wrong thing in it and build a case around what's true. She looked at him. You didn't give me those things on purpose, but I have them and I use them, and I'm not going to pretend they came from nowhere. Harlan looked at her for a long time. Something moved in his face that she had not seen there before. Not his usual performance of reasonableness, not the explanation already forming behind the eyes. Something quieter. Something that might have been seeing her clearly for the first time, which was both too late and she supposed better than never. You turned out fine, he said. I turned out myself, she said. Which is more specific. He almost smiled. It was a ghost of a thing gone before it fully arrived. He put his hat back on. I won't come back unless you say so, he said. I just needed to say it to your face. I know, she said. That took something. I'm noting it. He turned his horse. He rode out of the yard, and she watched him go, and she did not call after him, and she did not feel the thing she had sometimes feared. She would feel the pull backward, the old gravity of a life she had lived in for too long. She felt the ground under her feet. She felt the summer air. She felt exactly where she was. Ethan appeared in the doorway of the house. He had been inside, had understood without being told that this was hers to handle alone. All right, he said. Yes, she said. He looked at her face, reading it the way she had learned he read things carefully, completely, without projecting onto it what he wanted to find. You sure? I told him the truth, she said. In the right order. That's all I can do. She came back toward the house. I'm hungry. Is there anything left from dinner? He moved out of the doorway to let her pass, and as she went by him, he said very quietly, I'm glad you're here, Clara. She stopped in the doorway. She didn't turn around. I know, she said. I'm glad too. She went inside. A week later, a letter arrived from Margaret Sutton. The territorial prosecutor had formally charged Victor Cain on 3 counts of fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to defraud. Aldous Fenner, the proxy who had registered RC land and title, had been offered a reduced arrangement in exchange for testimony confirming Cain's direction of the scheme. Fenner had accepted. Horace Penny, the bank manager, had resigned his position and was under separate investigation. The downstream land operations Cain had been assembling, 3 ranches, a mill, a water company, were in legal disarray, their contracts contingent on the water rights that Cain now definitively did not possess. Clara read the letter twice, folded it, set it on the desk. Sam came in while she was sitting with it. He looked at her expression and said, "Good news." "Fenner's testifying," she said. "The whole structure is unwinding." Sam sat down. He turned his cedar stick in his hands. A new one. The last one had become a small wooden bird that now sat on the windowsill of the bunkhouse, which Clara had found one morning and asked him about, and he had said only that he made things when he was thinking, and left it at that. "You know what I keep thinking about," he said. "No," she said. "That green ledger," he said. "The one with the broken spine." Holt went back to it how many times trying to fix what he'd done, trying to make the numbers not say what they were saying. He looked at the cedar stick. Numbers don't lie if you read them right. He knew it. Just hoped nobody else would read them right. "I read them right," she said. "You did," he said. He set the cedar stick down. He looked at her with the 60-year face that had seen everything it had seen and reached its own conclusions. "Marsh would have liked you," he said. "He liked people who were careful for the right reasons." She thought about Theodore Marsh, the careful man, the meticulous surveyor, the dead man whose reputation had been borrowed for a lie and whose memory had been returned to its truth in a federal courtroom. "I hope so," she said. "He would have," Sam said with the certainty of a man who knew. On the last Thursday of August, Garrett came out to the ranch. He arrived in the early afternoon, and he was clearly nervous the way a young man is nervous when he's come to say something he's been working up to for a while. He held his hat in both hands when Clara came out to meet him. "Miss Dawson," he said, "I wanted to tell you I left the bank." She looked at him. "On your own terms." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "After Penny resigned, the new management asked me to stay. I thought about it." He paused. "I thought about what you said, about doing the right thing because it's right. And I thought if I go back in there and keep the books the way they've always been kept, nothing changes. The system gets a new face and the same bones." "So you left," she said. "So I left," he said. "I don't know exactly what's next. My family's farm is there, but I've been thinking about, I can keep books. I know that now. I know I'm good at it." He looked at her with the direct anxiety of a young man asking something he's not sure he has the right to ask. "I was wondering if you knew of anyone who might need a bookkeeper, someone who works honestly." Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned toward the house. "Ethan," she called. He appeared in the doorway. "This is Garrett," she said. "He kept the records that closed our case. He's looking for honest bookkeeping work." She paused. "He's thorough. I can vouch for that personally." Ethan looked at Garrett. Garrett looked at Ethan with the anxious hope of a young man who had done a hard thing and was hoping the hard thing led somewhere. "You eat lunch yet?" Ethan said. "No, sir," Garrett said. "Come in," Ethan said. "We'll talk." Garrett looked at Clara. She nodded once. The way you nod when something is going to be fine and you know it, but you let the person confirm it for themselves. He went inside. Clara stood in the yard for a moment and looked at the ranch, at the land in all directions, at the summer grass, still holding its color in the late August heat, at the creek, audible faintly from the east boundary, where the ford sat on solid legal ground for the first time in 3 years. She thought about what Sam had said, about a piece of land knowing who tends it. She thought she understood that now. The evening after Garrett had gone with a handshake agreement and a start date of the following Monday, Clara was sitting on the porch with her notes when Ethan came out and sat beside her. They sat together in the evening light for a while, the way they had learned to do, comfortable with the quiet, not filling it unnecessarily, each of them doing their own thinking in the same space. Then he said, "I want to ask you something." "All right," she said. "The east room," he said. "In the main house. It's been empty since for a long time." He paused. "It's larger than the bunkhouse room, better light, closer to the office." She looked at him. "You're suggesting I move rooms?" "I'm suggesting you might want a room in the house," he said, "if you're staying. Which you said you were." He looked at her directly. "Unless you've reconsidered." "I haven't reconsidered," she said. Then the east room makes more sense, he said, practically speaking. She looked at him for a long moment. There was something happening in this conversation that was both entirely practical and entirely not, and they were both aware of it, and he was being careful about it in the specific way he was careful not avoiding it, but not forcing it either, letting it be what it was at its own pace. Practically speaking, she said. Yes, he said. And what does it mean, she said, that I'd be in the main house in terms of what people in town will say? He was quiet for a moment. They'll say what they say, he said. They were wrong about you before. I reckon they can be wrong about whatever they decide this time too. I don't care what they say, she said clearly. I want to know what it means to you. He looked at her. It means I want you closer, he said. Simply. That's what it means. She held his gaze. She thought about walls she had built, and why and what they had cost her, and what it might cost to take them down piece by piece in the company of a man who had never once tried to take them down by force. All right, she said. He nodded. He was not a man who made large productions of significant moments, which was one of the things about him she had come to trust most deeply. I'll move the furniture tomorrow, he said. I can move my own furniture, she said. I know you can, he said. We'll both move it. She looked at the notes in her lap, at the ranch in the evening around her, at the summer holding its last warmth before the first hint of autumn still weeks away, but present in the quality of the late light. Ethan, she said. Yes. The night in the kitchen, she said. 2 a.m, you asked if I was all right. I remember, he said. I want to tell you what the real answer was, she said. Not the focused answer, the real one. He waited. I was scared, she said. Not of Cain, not of losing the case. Of what I was starting to want. Of being in a place that felt like mine when I didn't have any claim to it. Of starting to care about something again after a long time of not letting myself. She paused. That was the real answer. He was quiet for a long time. The evening moved around them. A night bird called once from the direction of the creek and was quiet. You have a claim now, he said. If you want it. She looked at him. In what sense? In every sense, he said. This ranch, what we built together, the case, the work, the... He stopped. He was not a man who had an easy time with the harder words, and she had known that for weeks and found it more reassuring than eloquence. Clara, I'm not good at saying the big things directly, but I want to be honest with you because you've been honest with me in ways I didn't deserve and didn't expect, and it changed things. It changed me. She put down her notes. She turned to face him fully, the way she had on the courthouse steps, giving him her full attention because he had earned it the way you earn something over time, not in one moment, but in all the small ones. You changed yourself, she said. I was there, and I was honest, and I didn't let you look away from the hard things. That's what I mean, he said. That's what changed me. She looked at him for a long moment. At this man, not easy, not uncomplicated, not the simple Western archetype she might have constructed if she'd been writing the story rather than living it. A real man. Quiet in the ways that counted. Certain in the ways that mattered. The kind of man who waited when he said he'd wait, and meant what he said, and looked at her like she was not a type, not a category, not a size or a social position, or a price at an auction. A person. A specific entire person. She had been waiting her whole life to be seen as that. She had not expected to find it in a ranch 6 miles from Redstone Creek, in a man who drank coffee at 2 a.m. and moved furniture when he said he would, and left just enough space for her to be exactly who she was. Ethan, she said, ask me directly. He looked at her. He understood what she meant. He didn't make her clarify it or reframe it. He just said it. Will you stay? He said. Not in the arrangement, not in the room. Here, with me, for the long kind. She sat with that for exactly as long as she needed to, which was not long. Yes, she said. I'll stay." He reached out and she took his hand, and they sat together in the last of the summer light, with the creek running somewhere to the east and the land around them, holding the particular piece of a place that knows it belongs to the right people. September came towards crossing, the way good things come quietly without announcement, confirming something that had already been true. Garrett kept the books, and he kept them honestly, and the numbers finally said what they were supposed to say. Sam Briggs finished 3 more small wooden figures that appeared without comment on various windowsills and fence posts and were never directly attributed to anyone. Margaret Sutton wrote with news that the territorial prosecutor had added a 4th charge against Cain, suborning false record, and that Fenner's cooperation had expanded the scope of the investigation to 2 other counties where similar schemes had been operating. The law, moving slowly as it moved, was moving. Horace Penny was replaced at the Redstone Gulch Savings and Loan by a younger man who kept records that could be read in the light of day. Harlan Dawson did not come back towards crossing. Clara neither waited for him nor worried about the waiting. She sent him a letter in October that said 3 things: that she was well, that she was where she intended to be, and that she hoped he was paying attention to things that deserved attention. She signed it, "Clara, not your daughter," because she was being precise, and precise was what she knew how to be. She did not know whether he read it carefully. She had done what she could. On an evening in late October, with the first real cold of the season in the air, and the cottonwoods gone gold along the creek, Clara stood at the east boundary of Ward's Crossing and looked at the ford. It was exactly what it had always been, a place where the creek ran shallow over flat rock, crossable, reliable, the kind of feature that made land valuable in a dry country. It was on their land. It would remain on their land. The federal record said so, and the law had confirmed it, and Victor Cain was 300 miles away, dealing with the consequences of having believed that systems could contain everything. She heard footsteps behind her and didn't turn. She knew his walk. Ethan stopped beside her and looked at the ford too. "Garrett found something this morning," he said. "Something wrong," she said. "Something right," he said. "An old receivable. A payment that was owed to the ranch for cattle sold 2 seasons ago and never collected because Holt never followed up on it." She looked at him. "How much?" "Enough," he said with the ghost of the almost smile she had learned to read as his version of genuine delight. "Enough to replace the south fence properly and have something left over." She turned back to the ford. "I'll write the collection letter," she said. "I know you will," he said. She could hear him smiling. She didn't look because if she looked, she would smile too, and she wanted to draw the moment out just a little longer, standing at the edge of the thing they had fought for, with the autumn around them and the sound of the creek and everything exactly as it should be. She had been sold for $40 on a summer morning in front of everyone she had ever known. She had walked off that platform with nothing but a bundle of her mother's things and a tin box of documents that didn't add up, and a mind that had been waiting her whole life for the right problem. She had found it. She had solved it. She had built something that could not be taken from her. Not by a fraudulent document, not by a corrupt judge, not by a man with a permanent smile and a scheme he'd spent years making untouchable. She had built it with accuracy and with patience, and with the specific courage that comes not from having nothing to lose, but from finally having something worth protecting. She had stayed, not because she had nowhere else to go, not because someone had made it easy, not because the world had finally decided she was worth something. She had stayed because she had decided. And Clara Dawson, who had been priced at $40 on the worst morning of her life, knew now with the certainty of a woman who had learned to trust what she could prove, that she was not a price. She was not an auction. She was not a placement. She was not a type or a category or a number on a platform. She was the woman who had read the broken ledger and found the lie inside it. She was the woman who had ridden to Cheyenne twice and built a federal case from a ranch's disordered papers. She was the woman who had stood in front of Victor Cain in a sun-baked yard and showed him without raising her voice that she had already seen every move he intended to make. She was the woman who had chosen to stay, and she would choose it again every morning for the rest of her life, not out of obligation, Not out of gratitude, not out of the absence of other options. Out of the absolute, unshakable knowledge that this was where she belonged, that this land knew her, that this man saw her, that she, Clara Dawson, had walked off a $40 platform and built herself a life worth every single cent she had never been paid. And she had done it on her own terms, in her own time, with her own hands, and no one in this world or the next one would ever put a price on her again.